Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Marcus Ravenhill, and I've been a park ranger for 19 years. I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know the truth before they come for me, before I forget again. I work the Jefferson National Forest in Virginia, mostly up on Devil's Backbone Ridge. It's rough country, the kind of place where cell phones don't work and GPS gets confused. The Cherokee used to avoid this area, said it was thin between worlds. I always figured that was just old mountain talk. 3 years ago, I was a different man. Had a wife, Sarah, and twin boys, Jake and Tommy, both 12. We lived in a small cabin just outside the park boundary. Sarah used to joke that I loved those mountains more than I loved her. Maybe she was right. After the divorce, after she took the boys and moved to Richmond, I threw myself even deeper into the work. The ridge became my whole life. I knew every trail, every stream, every cave. I could track a deer through rocky ground in the dark. The other rangers called me the best search and rescue man in the state. I was proud of that. But something's been wrong up there lately. Maybe it always was, and I just started noticing. Animals act strange, deer running in perfect circles, birds flying into trees on purpose. The temperature drops 20 degrees for no reason, then jumps back up. Your compass spins like a toy, and people go missing. Not just lost, missing in ways that don't make sense. Their camps look like they just walked away mid-sentence, food still warm on the fire, tents zipped shut from the inside but empty, no tracks leading anywhere. This month alone, we've had 4 families vanish. 4. The Hendersons on the 3rd, the Kowalski family on the 9th, the Reeds on the 15th, and now the Garcias on the 22nd. Each time, I lead the search teams. Each time, we find nothing. My partner, Jenny Mountainheart, thinks so. Something's not right with me. She's Cherokee. Grew up hearing the old stories about Devil's Backbone. Yesterday she pulled me aside after we finished searching for the Garcias. "Marcus, you look terrible," she said. "When's the last time you slept?" I couldn't remember. The days blur together up there. Sometimes I start a search in the morning and blink, and it's night. Time moves funny on the ridge. "I keep having dreams," I told her. "Sarah and the boys calling for help. But when I try to find them, I end up at that stone arch near Raven's Peak." Jenny went quiet. "The arch is old. Older than the Cherokee, they say. Looks like a doorway to nowhere, just standing there in a clearing where nothing grows. You need to stay away from that place, Marcus. My grandmother used to say it's where the Nunahigh take people. The Nunahigh. The Cherokee called them the immortal ones, supposed to be helpful spirits who protect lost travelers. But Jenny's grandmother told different stories, stories about things that only looked helpful until it was too late. I should have listened to her." The call came in at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Another missing family, the Brennans from Ohio. Mom, Dad, 2 teenage daughters. Their campsite was neat as a pin except for one thing. 4 cups of coffee sitting on the picnic table, still steaming hot. "They can't have gone far," Jenny said, but her voice had doubt in it. "Coffee's still hot." We split up to cover more ground. I took the north trail toward Raven's Peak. Something pulled me that way. Not logic, just a feeling in my gut. The morning was too quiet. No bird sounds, no insects. Even my footsteps seemed muffled. I found their trail after half a mile. 4 sets of footprints walking single file, perfect spacing between them. Too perfect, like they were marching. The prints led straight toward the stone arch. As I got closer, the air got thick, and cold. My radio started crackling with voices, not dispatch, but whispers in a language I didn't know. The compass needle spun wildly, then pointed directly at the arch. That's when I saw them. The Brennan family stood in front of the arch, holding hands in a circle. They weren't moving, weren't breathing that I could see. Their skin looked pale, almost gray. I called out, but they didn't respond. I approached slowly, hand on my radio. "Jenny, I found them. They're acting strange." Static answered me. When I got within 20 feet, Mrs. Brennan turned her head toward me. Her eyes were solid black. No whites, no pupils, just black holes in her face. "We're waiting for you, Marcus," she said in a voice like grinding stone. "We've been waiting so long." The others turned then. Mr. Brennan, both daughters, all with those empty black eyes, all smiling with too many teeth. I ran. Behind me I heard laughter echoing off the trees. But when I looked back, the family was gone. Just 4 sets of footprints leading to the arch and stopping. I radioed for backup, but all I got was static and whispers. By the time I made it back to base camp, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the radio. "Find anything?" Jenny asked. "Prints leading to the arch, then nothing," I lied. "We'll need to expand the search." But that night, alone in my cabin, I started remembering things that didn't make sense. Conversations with families I'd supposedly rescued, but I couldn't picture their faces. Reports I'd written about successful searches, but the words looked like someone else's handwriting. And I kept hearing Sarah's voice calling from somewhere far away. "Marcus, help us! Please, we're still here." I checked my personnel file the next morning. According to the records, I'd successfully found and rescued 16 missing persons in the last 3 years. But I couldn't remember a single one of their names. The dreams got worse after that. Every night I'd find myself walking through the forest toward Raven's Peak. In the dreams, Sarah and the boys were always just ahead of me, calling for help, but I could never catch up. I'd wake up with dirt under my fingernails and pine needles in my hair. 3 days after the Brennan incident, Jenny confronted me in the office. "Marcus, I need you to look at something." She spread out a map of Devil's Backbone Ridge on my desk. "I've been tracking the disappearances over the last 3 years. Every single missing person was found by you during their initial search." I stared at the red X marks she'd drawn. 16 locations, all within a 5-mile radius of the stone arch. "So? I know that area better than anyone." "Look closer." She circled the dates. "Every rescue happened between 2 and 4 a.m. Every single one. And Marcus, there's no record of these people anywhere after their rescue. No hospital visits, no insurance claims, no social media posts. It's like they disappeared again the moment you brought them back." My head started pounding. "That's impossible." "Is it? When's the last time you remember actually talking to one of these rescued families?" I tried to think, but it was like trying to grab smoke. The harder I focused, the more the memories slipped away. That afternoon, Jenny insisted on coming with me to search for the Brennans. We hiked to the stone arch together, but when we got there, something was different. The arch looked bigger, older. The ground around it was covered in strange symbols carved into the dirt, spirals and lines that hurt to look at directly. "This wasn't here yesterday," I said. Jenny knelt beside one of the symbols. "These are old, Marcus. Really old. My grandmother drew pictures like this when she told stories about the hungry spirits." As she spoke, the temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Our breath came out in white puffs. The symbols on the ground started glowing with a faint blue light. "We need to leave," Jenny whispered. "Now," but I couldn't move. Through the arch, I could see something that wasn't the other side of the clearing. It was a vast underground chamber filled with pale, stretched-out figures hanging from the ceiling like cocoons. Some of them were moving. "Marcus!" Jenny grabbed my arm. "Don't look at it." Too late. In the chamber, one of the figures turned its head toward me. It had Mr. Brennan's face, but elongated, with black eyes and a mouth that opened too wide. "Come home, Marcus," it said. "Your family is waiting." I stumbled backward, but my legs felt like lead. The arch was pulling me forward with invisible hands. Jenny was shouting something, but I couldn't hear her over the voices coming from inside the chamber. Sarah's voice, clear as day. "Marcus, we're here. We've been waiting for you. Bring Jenny too. She'll make beautiful children." I took a step toward the arch. That's when Jenny tackled me, knocking me to the ground. The spell broke, and we ran back down the trail as fast as we could. Behind us, something roared with the sound of tearing metal and breaking glass. At the bottom of the ridge, Jenny grabbed me by the shoulders. "Marcus, listen to me. That thing in there, it's not helping people. It's collecting them, and I think it's been using you to bring them there." I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew she was right. The blank spaces in my memory, the impossible rescues, the way I always seemed to know exactly where to find people. "What happened to Sarah and the boys?" I whispered. Jenny's face went pale. "Marcus, Sarah called the office 3 years ago. She said you'd brought her and the boys camping up on Devil's Backbone, but you were acting strange. That was the last anyone heard from them." The world tilted sideways. I remembered now. Not all of it, but enough. Taking my family camping to work things out, leading them up the trail as the sun set. Their confused questions as I guided them toward the stone arch. "I killed them," I said. "I fed my own family to that thing." Jenny found me 3 hours later, sitting in my cabin with my service weapon in my lap. She kicked the door open and knocked the gun out of my hands before I could use it. "You're not thinking straight," she said. "Whatever that thing did to your mind, we can fight it." I remember now, Jenny. I remember leading them through the arch. Sarah was screaming, asking me why. The boys were crying. And I just watched as those things took them. It wasn't you, Marcus. That entity, whatever it is, it's been controlling you, making you bring people to it. She pulled out a folder filled with newspaper clippings and photos. "I've been researching. This has happened before, 1923, 1947, 1962, 1991. Every time a park ranger starts finding missing people in impossible circumstances. Then the ranger disappears, and everything stops for 20 to 30 years. Until the next one. Until the next one. Marcus, I think this thing needs human cooperation. It can't just take people. They have to be brought to it willingly by someone they trust." I looked at my hands. The fingernails were longer than they should be, and when I turned them in the light, they looked almost black. "It's changing me, isn't it? We can stop this. The old stories say the Nunahigh can be trapped, but only by someone who's been partially converted. You're the key, Marcus. You can close that doorway." That night, we went back to Devil's Backbone Ridge. Jenny carried a backpack full of Cherokee ritual items her grandmother had left her. Burning sage, carved stones, blessed tobacco. I carried explosives from the Park Service demolition kit. The stone arch was bigger now, nearly 15 feet tall. The air around it shimmered like heat waves, and through the opening we could see the vast chamber clearly. Hundreds of pale, elongated figures hung from the ceiling, some still moving. At the far end of the chamber, something massive shifted in the shadows. A breeding program," Jenny whispered. "They're not just taking people, they're changing them." As we approached, the figures in the chamber began to stir. Some dropped from the ceiling and walked toward the arch. I recognized faces, the Hendersons, the Kowalskis, the Reeds, the Garcias, all stretched and pale with black eyes and too many teeth. And there, in the front of the group, were Sarah and the boys. "Daddy!" Tommy called out, his voice echoing strangely. "We've been waiting for you. Come play with us." My heart broke all over again. Even transformed, even wrong, they were still my family. "Marcus, don't listen," Jenny said. "They're not your family anymore." The entity in the shadows moved forward. It was massive, like a spider made of shadows and teeth, with hundreds of human faces embedded in its surface. When it spoke, it was with the voices of everyone it had ever taken. "Marcus Ravenhill," it said, "you have served well. Come complete your transformation. Rule beside us as we harvest this world." "What are you?" I shouted. "We are the Nunahigh. We are the harvesters of worlds. We are the gardeners of flesh. This world is ready now. Thanks to you, we have enough hybrid children to begin the true invasion." The transformed humans stepped through the arch into our world. Sarah reached out to me with fingers that ended in claws. "Don't you want to be a family again?" she asked. I looked at Jenny. She nodded once. I pulled the pin on the explosive charge and threw it through the arch into the chamber. Then Jenny and I ran as fast as we could down the ridge. The explosion shook the entire mountain. Trees fell, rocks tumbled. When we looked back, the stone arch was collapsing in on itself, and the screams of the entity echoed across the forest. But as the arch crumbled, I felt something tear inside my mind, like a rope snapping. The entity's control broke, and with it came all my real memories, not just of the last 3 years, but of the 19 years I'd worked these mountains. I remembered the real rescues, the real families I'd helped. I remembered why I'd become a ranger in the first place, to protect people, not lead them to their doom. That was 6 months ago. The official report says a landslide caused by underground gas pockets destroyed the stone formation on Devil's Backbone Ridge. The missing persons cases were closed as presumed dead due to natural disaster. Jenny and I both took early retirement. She moved back to the reservation to be with her people. I bought a small house in town, as far from the mountains as I could get. But I still dream about that chamber. I still hear Sarah and the boys calling for me. And sometimes when the wind blows just right, I catch a scent of pine and stone that makes my heart race with terror. The thing that scares me most is what the entity said about hybrid children. We destroyed the arch, but what about the ones that were already born? What about the ones living among us, looking human, but thinking alien thoughts? Yesterday I saw a young man at the grocery store who looked exactly like Tommy would look now, 10 years older. Same eyes, same smile. But when he looked at me, there was something cold and hungry in his gaze. "Hello, Daddy," he said in Tommy's voice. I ran. Like a coward, I ran. I'm writing this down because my memory isn't reliable anymore. Sometimes I forget things, important things. Sometimes I catch myself driving toward the mountains without remembering why. The entity's hold on me is broken, but the damage to my mind might be permanent. If you're reading this and I'm gone, stay away from Devil's Backbone Ridge. The arch is gone, but something tells me the Nunahigh aren't finished with this world. They've been harvesting for centuries, across dimensions, across realities, and they're patient. They can wait another 20 years for the right person to come along, someone desperate enough, broken enough, to be molded into a new harvester. Only one who knows the mountains and whom people trust. Someone like the young ranger who started work last week, David Whitehawk, fresh out of the academy, eager to help people. I tried to warn him, but he just smiled, that same hungry smile I've been seeing in my dreams. "Don't worry, Mr. Ravenhill," he said. "I'll take good care of these mountains." That's when I knew they were already here. The children, the hybrids, growing up, taking jobs, waiting for their chance to continue the harvest. I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't know where I'll go, but it has to be somewhere far from forests and stone arches and thin places between worlds. If you see me after today, don't trust me. Don't follow me into the woods, because I might not be me anymore. My name is Marcus Ravenhill, and I used to be a park ranger. I used to protect people. Now I'm writing this as fast as I can before they come to take me home. The breeding grounds are everywhere, and they're still hungry. My name is Samuel Ironworks, and I've been telling myself for 3 years that what happened in the Seneca Rocks mine was just bad gas. Methane makes you see things, hear things. That's what I kept saying. But gas doesn't explain the machinery that was never built, or why my rescue equipment still turns itself on in the middle of the night. I was 39 then, been a mine safety expert for the Forest Service for 14 years. Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. That was my beat. Most folks think park rangers just watch trees and tell tourists not to feed bears. But the old mining country is different. Abandoned mines are death traps. Cave-ins, poisonous air, bottomless shafts. I'd pulled more bodies out of those holes than I care to count. The Seneca Rocks complex was the worst of them. 7 different mining operations over 100 years, all shut down after accidents. 3 of my own colleagues died in there. Jim Hartley in '79, Maria Santos in '81, and Bobby Chen just 6 months before this all started. Bobby was like a son to me. 26 years old, careful as they come. The official report said equipment failure, but I knew every piece of gear in that mine. Nothing was wrong with it when we went in. My wife Sarah used to joke that I talked to machines more than people. Maybe she was right. After Bobby died, I spent more time checking and rechecking every bolt, every cable, every sensor. Equipment doesn't lie. Equipment doesn't make mistakes. People do. That's why when the survey team went missing on November 15th, I didn't hesitate. 3 geologists from the state university doing some study on limestone formations. They'd been down in the old Seneca complex for 6 hours past their scheduled return. No radio contact. In my line of work, 6 hours might as well be 6 weeks. I remember the weather that day, cold enough to see your breath, but not quite freezing. The kind of November day where the forest feels empty, waiting. Sarah had made me promise to be home by dinner. She'd been making a lot of promises and demands lately, ever since I started waking up in the middle of the night, claiming I heard engines running in the basement. The mine entrance looked normal enough. Standard steel door, rusted but solid, warning signs in 3 languages. I did my equipment check twice: headlamp, backup lights, rope, first aid kit, air monitor, radio. Everything exactly where it should be. Everything working perfectly. The first thing I noticed going in was the temperature. Should have been maybe 40 degrees down there, cool and damp. Instead, it felt like walking toward a furnace. My thermometer read 68 degrees at the entrance, 75 20 yards in. In 30 years of mine work, I'd never seen anything like it. The second thing I noticed was the sound. It was faint at first, just a low humming that I figured was wind through the tunnels. But as I went deeper, following the survey team's markers, it got louder. Not wind, machinery. Heavy machinery, the kind they use in steel mills and car factories. The kind that shouldn't exist 200 feet underground in an abandoned mine. I followed the main tunnel for maybe a quarter mile before I found the first survey marker just lying on the ground. Not dropped, placed. Carefully set down next to a side tunnel that wasn't on any of my maps. The air coming out of that tunnel was hot enough to make me sweat, and the machinery sounds were definitely coming from in there. That's when I should have called for backup. But 3 people were missing, and in mine rescue, every minute counts. I checked my air monitor. No dangerous gases. Checked my radio. No signal. But that was normal this deep. Everything by the book. I just didn't know whose book I would learn. As following. The side tunnel sloped down at a steep angle, carved rough through the limestone. But as I followed it, the walls got smoother, more finished. After about 50 yards, they weren't limestone anymore. They were metal, thick, riveted steel plates like you'd see in a ship's hull. The temperature climbed past 80 degrees. My headlamp beam caught something ahead, another survey marker. This one stuck upright in what looked like a small pile of coal. Except when I got closer, I saw it wasn't coal. It was metal shavings. Fresh ones, curled and sharp like they'd just come off a lathe. Still warm to the touch. The tunnel opened into a chamber that shouldn't have existed. My light couldn't find the far walls or the ceiling. The machinery sounds were loud now. Rhythmic hammering, the whine of metal cutting metal, the hiss of steam under pressure. And underneath it all, a sound that made my stomach turn. Voices. Lots of voices, calling out numbers. 217. Move it. Move it. Quota's at 500. Line 3 is behind schedule. I followed my light beam across the floor and found railroad tracks. Not old mining tracks. New ones. Heavy gauge steel that disappeared into the darkness ahead. The rails were warm. Hell, they were hot. And as I knelt down to examine them, I felt vibration. Something big was coming. The ground shook. A wind that smelled like hot metal and sulfur rushed past me. And then I saw the lights. 2 yellow beams cutting through the darkness, getting bigger fast. A train. A goddamn train in an abandoned mine, bearing down on me at maybe 40 miles an hour. I dove sideways, rolling behind what I thought was a rock outcropping. The train roared past, Not some little mining cart, but a full-sized locomotive pulling maybe 20 cars. Through the windows, I caught glimpses of people in hard hats and work clothes, all sitting perfectly still, staring straight ahead. One of the people was Dr. Rebecca Martinez from the survey team. The train's lights faded into the distance, but the tracks kept vibrating. Morton, the trains were coming. I had to move. I followed a narrow walkway beside the tracks, staying close to the wall. The chamber was enormous, big enough to echo, big enough that my light couldn't find the boundaries, and it was full of structures I couldn't identify. Towers of metal scaffolding reaching up into the darkness, conveyor belts carrying loads of something that glowed red-hot, massive wheels turning slowly, connected to drive shafts that disappeared into the floor and ceiling. It was a factory, an impossible underground factory that had no business existing. I found the second survey team member at what looked like a workstation. Dr. James Liu was standing in front of a control panel, pressing buttons and adjusting dials. He was moving like a robot, precise, mechanical, never stopping. His eyes were open, but completely blank. "Jim!" I called out. "Jim, it's Sam Ironworks from Forest Service. We need to get out of here." He turned toward me, and I saw that his face was streaked with soot and sweat. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless. "Production quota is 400 units per 8-hour shift. Current output is 312 units. Must increase efficiency." I grabbed his shoulder, tried to shake him. His skin was burning hot through his shirt. "Jim, you're Dr. James Liu. You're a geologist from the university. You have a wife named Susan and 2 kids." For just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Fear. "Sam?" he whispered. "Sam, help me. I can't stop working. Every time I try to stop, it gets so hot I can't breathe. They said if I meet my quota, I can see Susan again." "Who said that? Who's making you work?" But before he could answer, a whistle blew somewhere in the darkness. A factory whistle, long and loud. Jim's face went blank again. "End of break period. Return to production stations." He turned back to hit this control panel and started working again. When I tried to pull him away, his hands wouldn't leave the controls. They were stuck there, fused to the metal like they'd grown together. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me, heavy boots on metal floors, and a voice that sounded like it came from the bottom of a furnace. "New worker assigned to Section 7. Report for orientation." I turned around and saw something that used to be human. It wore a foreman's hard hat and carried a clipboard, but its skin was the color of hot coals, and its eyes glowed like pilot lights. When it smiled, I could see that its teeth were made of metal. "Samuel Ironworks," it said, reading from the clipboard. "Age 39. 14 years experience in mine safety and rescue operations. Perfect qualifications for quality control supervisor." "I don't work here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm here to rescue the survey team." The thing laughed and sparks shot out of its mouth. "Everyone works here eventually. The only question is what position you'll hold and how much you'll suffer getting there." Dr. Liu started in inventory management. He's worked his way up to production control. Very dedicated employee. I started backing away, but the walkway behind me was gone. Just empty air over a drop into darkness. "Dr. Martinez is in transportation now," the foreman continued. "She complained at first about the working conditions, but after a few years of engineering, she learned to appreciate the benefits. Steady work, clear expectations, and best of all, she'll never have to worry about being fired." "Years? The survey team has been missing for 6 hours. Time moves differently here. We operate on efficiency metrics, not Earth schedules. Would you like to see our employee handbook?" It held out what looked like a book, but when I looked closer, I saw it was made of metal pages covered in writing that seemed to move and change as I watched. Rule 1. All employees will meet production quotas or face corrective action. Rule 2. Sick days, vacation days, and personal days are not permitted. Rule 3. Employment is permanent. Rule 4. Family members may be hired to improve employee motivation. What kind of place is this? The future of industry, Mr. Ironworks. We've eliminated all the inefficiencies of surface world business. No unions, no government regulations, no worker complaints, and absolutely no retirement. Another train roared past, and I caught a glimpse of more people in the windows. Men and women in work clothes, all with the same blank stare. Some of them were wearing clothes that looked decades old. Others were in modern gear, but their faces were streaked with soot, and their eyes had the hollow look of people who'd been working too long without rest. The Seneca Rocks Complex has been one of our most successful recruitment centers, the foreman said proudly. Every mining accident, every equipment failure, every unfortunate incident brings us new workers. Your friend Bobby Chen is doing excellent work in metallurgy. My blood went cold. Bobby's dead. Death is just a change in employment status. He's much more productive now that he doesn't need food or sleep or bathroom breaks. Would you like to see him? Before I could answer, the foreman blew a whistle that hung around its neck. The sound echoed through the factory, and suddenly the place was full of activity. Conveyor belts started moving faster. The massive wheels spun up to higher speeds, and from everywhere, I heard voices calling out numbers. Section 4 at 80% efficiency. Need more raw materials in production bay 7. Quality control reports 17 defective units. And then I saw them. Workers coming out of tunnels and doorways I hadn't noticed before. Dozens of them, then hundreds. All moving with that same mechanical precision, all heading to different stations throughout the factory. Most were wearing hard hats and work clothes, but some were in suits and dresses, like they'd been pulled straight from office jobs or family dinners. I recognized some of the faces. Missing persons from newspaper. Stories going back years. A family from Charleston who'd disappeared on a camping trip in '78. A businessman from Pittsburgh who'd vanished while driving through the area in '80. And there, working at a massive stamping press, was Bobby Chen. He looked exactly the same as the day he died, except his skin had that same coal-like darkness as the foreman. He was feeding metal sheets into the press with mechanical precision, never stopping, never slowing down. "Bobby!" I shouted over the noise of the machinery. He looked up, and for a moment his face showed recognition. But then a supervisor, another one of those coal-skinned things, appeared beside him. "Employee Chen, you're falling behind quota. Increase output or report for efficiency enhancement." Bobby's face went blank again, and he turned back to his work. But as he did, I saw him mouth a single word. "Run." I didn't need to be told twice. I started looking for another way out, but everywhere I turned, there were more workers, more machinery, more of those glowing-eyed supervisors. The factory seemed to be growing around me, expanding into spaces that had been empty moments before. "There's no way out, Mr. Ironworks," the foreman called after me. "This is where you belong. This is where everyone belongs eventually. The surface world is just our recruitment pool." I found what looked like a maintenance ladder leading up to a higher level. As I climbed, I could see more of the factory's scope. It stretched for miles in every direction, level after level of industrial nightmare. And at the very center, rising like a metal mountain, was a massive structure that hurt to look at directly. It was covered in pipes and cables and spinning wheels, and from its peak came a sound like the screaming of 1,000 voices. "The central processing plant," the foreman said from below. He was climbing after me, moving faster than any human could. "That's where we convert raw materials into useful products. Very efficient, very thorough. Nothing goes to waste." "What kind of products?" "Oh, the usual. Suffering, despair, hopelessness. We ship them to factories all over the world. Surface businesses are some of our best customers, though they don't always realize it." I reached the top of the ladder and found myself on a narrow catwalk that stretched across the factory floor. Below me, the workers continued their endless tasks. Above me, pipes and cables formed a maze that disappeared into the darkness. And ahead of me, standing in the middle of the catwalk, was the third member of the survey team. Dr. Sarah Washington was holding a clipboard and wearing a hard hat, just like the other supervisors. But her skin was still human-colored, still normal. When she saw me, she smiled. "Sam, thank God you're here. I've been trying to find a way out for... How long have I been down here?" 6 hours, I said. though I was starting to doubt my own sense of time. 6 hours? It feels like weeks. These people, they keep trying to make me work, but I've been pretending to cooperate while looking for an escape route. Something was wrong. Sarah Washington was the lead geologist, older than the other two, more experienced. If anyone could find a way out, it would be her. But she was standing in the middle of a catwalk in an impossible underground factory, acting like this was just another work problem to solve. "Sarah, we need to get out of here now. Something is very wrong with this place." "I know," she said. "I've been documenting everything. The geological formations alone are impossible. This facility extends for miles in every direction, and according to my calculations, parts of it exist below sea level. The engineering required would be—" She stopped talking and tilted her head, like she was listening, to something I couldn't hear. "Oh," she said quietly. "Oh, I see." Her clipboard burst into flames, but she didn't drop it. Instead, she watched the fire spread to her hands, then up her arms. Her skin began to darken and crack. "You can't leave, Sam," she said, her voice changing, getting deeper. "None of us can. This is where we belong now. This is our real job." I ran, didn't think, didn't plan, just turned and ran along the catwalk as fast as I could. Behind me I could hear Sarah, or the thing that used to be Sarah, calling out in that new furnace voice. "Security alert! Unprocessed worker attempting to leave designated area." Sirens started blaring throughout the factory. Emergency lights began flashing red, and from every direction, I could hear the sound of heavy footsteps as supervisors converged on my position. The catwalk branched ahead of me. Left led deeper into the factory, toward that central processing plant. Right led toward what looked like another tunnel. I went right, but 20 yards down the walkway, I hit a dead end. Just a sheer drop into machinery that was grinding and spinning and reaching up toward me with metal arms. I turned back, but the supervisors were already there. 4 of them, all with that same coal dark skin and glowing eyes. One of them was carrying what looked like a branding iron that glowed white hot. "Samuel Ironworks," the lead supervisor said. "You are hereby assigned to production line 12. Your orientation will begin immediately." "I don't work for you," I said. "I'm a federal employee. I'm here on official business." They all laughed, and the sound was like steam escaping from a boiler. "The United States Forest Service is one of our subsidiary companies," the supervisor said. "Has been since 1943. Where do you think mining accidents come from? Random bad luck? We create the conditions, we harvest the workers, we expand our operations. Your government writes it off as industrial accidents and natural disasters. That's impossible." "Is it? How many mine rescue operations have you been on, Mr. Irons?" "Works. How many colleagues have you lost to equipment failures and cave-ins? How many times have you found bodies in places they shouldn't have been able to reach?" I thought about Bobby, about Jim and Maria, about dozens of other rescues over the years. Bodies found in sealed tunnels, equipment that failed for no reason, missing persons who vanished without a trace. "Every surface business feeds into our operation eventually," the supervisor continued. "Mining companies, steel mills, auto plants, tech corporations. They all follow our management principles because our management principles work. Maximum productivity, minimum worker satisfaction, and absolutely no concern for human welfare." "You're talking about capitalism," I said. "We're talking about hell, Mr. Ironworks. Same thing, really. We just eliminated the middleman." They started moving toward me, the branding iron getting closer. I could feel the heat from 20 feet away. That's when I heard the sound that saved my life, my radio crackling to life. "Sam, this is base. Sam, do you copy?" It was Sarah, my wife, calling from the Forest Service station. Somehow, impossibly, the signal was getting through. "Sarah," I shouted into the radio. "I'm in the Seneca mine complex. I need immediate backup, full hazmat team, and—" The supervisors froze. They were looking at my radio like it was a snake. "Outside communication is not permitted during work hours," one of them said, but its voice was uncertain. "Sam, I can barely hear you," Sarah's voice continued. "Your location shows as 3 miles underground. That can't be right." 3 miles. I'd walked maybe half a mile into the mine. "The GPS is correct," I said. "This place is enormous. It goes down forever." "That's impossible. The geological surveys show solid rock at that depth." And suddenly I understood. This factory, this industrial nightmare, existed in the spaces between spaces. It was using the mine tunnels as doorways, but the real facility existed somewhere else entirely, somewhere that connected to every industrial accident, every workplace disaster, every corporate decision that valued profits over human life. "You need to seal the mine entrance," I told Sarah. "Blow it up, collapse it, whatever you have to do. Don't let anyone else come down here." The supervisors were backing away from me now, like my radio was toxic to them. "We cannot complete your orientation while outside interference is present," the lead supervisor said. "Report to maintenance level 7 for communication device removal." But I was already moving. The radio signal meant there was still a connection to the surface world, still a way out. I just had to find it. I climbed over the catwalk railing and dropped down onto a conveyor belt that was carrying loads of raw metal toward the central processing plant. The belt was moving fast, and I had to run to keep from getting carried along with the cargo. Around me, the factory workers continued their tasks, but now they were all looking at me. Their blank expressions had changed to something like hope. "Don't leave us," one of them called out. "Please don't leave us here." But I couldn't save them. I could barely save myself. The conveyor belt led to a loading dock where trains were being filled with finished products. I jumped off and ran toward what looked like the main tunnel, but supervisors were converging from every direction. That's when the central processing plant let out a sound like the world ending. A scream of metal and steam and something else, something that might have been human voices but was too loud and too distorted to be sure. And in that moment of chaos, I saw my chance. A maintenance tunnel, barely wide enough for one person, leading up at a steep angle. I dove into it just as the first supervisor reached the loading dock. The tunnel was a nightmare of pipes and cables and spinning gears. I had to crawl on my hands and knees, and every few feet something tried to grab me. Mechanical arms, spinning blades, jets of scalding steam. But I kept moving, following the faint signal from my radio. Behind me, I could hear them coming. The supervisors had shed any pretense of being human. They were moving like machines now, all clicking gears and hissing hydraulics. The tunnel ended at a vertical shaft with a ladder. I climbed as fast as I could, my equipment weighing me down, my lungs burning from the hot air. Above me, I could see a faint light. Not the artificial glare of the factory, but real sunlight. 20 feet from the top, I heard Sarah's voice again, stronger now. "Sam, I can see your signal moving up. Are you okay?" "I'm alive," I said. "But Sarah, you need to—" The ladder shook. Something was climbing up after me, fast. I looked down and saw one of the supervisors, but it had changed. It was all sharp edges and spinning parts now, a machine designed for one purpose, to drag workers back to their stations. I reached the top of the shaft and found myself in a small cave. Ahead of me was a crack in the rock wall just wide enough to squeeze through. Sunlight was streaming in from the other side. I pushed through the crack and found myself standing in the forest, maybe 200 yards from the main mine entrance. My radio immediately started working perfectly. "Sam, where are you?" "I'm at the mine entrance with a full rescue team." I looked back at the crack in the rock. It was already getting smaller, sealing itself up. And from the other side, I could hear the factory sounds getting fainter. But they weren't gone. They were just waiting. That was 3 years ago. The official report said the survey team died in a methane explosion. Equipment failure. Happens all the time in old mines. The Seneca Rocks complex was sealed permanently. Concrete poured into the entrance. Warning signs posted. The whole area declared off limits. But I know they're still down there. All of them. Bobby, the survey team, and thousands of others, working their shifts in an impossible factory that exists in the spaces between our world and someplace much worse. I retired 6 months after the incident. Early retirement, full pension with a medical note about post-traumatic stress. Sarah says I'm better now, but she still finds me in the basement sometimes, checking and rechecking my old rescue equipment. Because late at night, when the house is quiet, I can hear it turning itself on. The radio crackles with voices calling out production numbers. The headlamp flickers in patterns that look almost like signals. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear Bobby's voice coming through the static. "Sam," he says. "Sam, they're expanding. They're buying up mining companies, construction firms, manufacturing plants. They're coming to the surface." I've been tracking industrial accidents in the newspaper. Mine collapses in Kentucky, factory explosions in Ohio, construction site disasters in Pennsylvania. All in a line, all moving outward from the Seneca Rocks complex like a slow-motion invasion. Last week, Sarah got a job offer from a new company that just bought the local mining operation. Great pay, excellent benefits, and a guarantee of permanent employment. When I asked her about the company name, she showed me the letterhead, Ironworks Industrial Solutions. My name, but not my company. They're using my name, my reputation, my 14 years of mine safety experience to lure in new workers. And the worst part is, it's working. Half the town has applied for jobs with them. I tried to warn people, but who's going to believe a retired park ranger with PTSD who claims he found hell in an abandoned mine? The company has doctors who say trauma can cause elaborate hallucinations. They have government contracts that prove their legitimacy. They have safety records that are too good to question. They have an answer for everything. But they can't answer this. Why do I still hear the factory sounds every night? Why does my rescue equipment turn itself on at exactly 3:17 a.m.? And why, when I drive past the sealed mine entrance, can I see fresh tire tracks leading right up to the concrete barrier? The truth is, they never needed the mine. The mine was just a recruiting office. The real factory exists everywhere now. Every workplace where people are treated like machines. Every job where productivity matters more than human life. Every company where workers are just numbers on a spreadsheet. I should have stayed down there with the others. At least then I'd know what I was fighting. Instead, I'm up here watching the world turn into the thing I escaped from, one industrial accident at a time. And every night when my radio crackles to life and Bobby's voice comes through the static, I have to ask myself the same question. Am I the one who got away, or am I the one they sent back to recruit the rest of you? The answer keeps me awake until dawn. Because somewhere deep underground, in a factory that shouldn't exist, the night shift is just getting started, and they're always hiring. My name is Elizabeth Thornfield, and I need to tell you what happened in Cataluchi Valley 12 years ago. I'm a park ranger now, but back then I was just starting out. Fresh out of training, eager to help families enjoy the Great Smoky Mountains safely. I thought the hardest part of my job would be bears and broken bones. I was wrong. People always ask why I chose this work. The truth is simple. I lost my little brother Tommy when I was 15. He wandered off during a family camping trip and never came back. The search teams found nothing. No trace, no clues. He just vanished like he'd never existed at all. That kind of loss changes you. Makes you want to protect other kids so no family goes through what mine did. Cataluchi Valley was my favorite assignment. Tucked away in the mountains, it felt like stepping back in time. Old cabins, wild horses, families making memories. Kids running around while parents set up tents and started campfires. It was everything I loved about the outdoors, pure and innocent. The valley had stories, of course. Every old place does. Cherokee legends about spirits in the woods. Tales of children who played games that never ended. But I figured those were just stories people told around campfires to give each other goosebumps. That August was different from the start. The air felt thick and wrong, like right before a bad storm that never comes. The horses acted strange, clustering together, refusing to graze in certain spots. Even the birds seemed quieter than usual. I first noticed the playground on a Tuesday morning during my rounds. Someone had built it overnight in a clearing near the old church. Swings, a slide, monkey bars, all made from branches and rope. It looked harmless enough, even charming in a rustic way. Kids love that kind of thing, but something about it made my skin crawl. Maybe it was how perfectly it was built. Like professional playground equipment but made from forest materials, or maybe it was how quiet it was around there. No insects buzzing, no birds singing, just silence. I radioed it in to headquarters. "We've got an unauthorized structure in Sector 7, I said. "Looks like someone built a playground." "Kids probably made it," came the response. "You know how they are. Leave it for now, unless it's dangerous." I walked closer to check for safety hazards. The swings looked sturdy, the slide was smooth. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. I made a note to keep an eye on it. That afternoon, the Morrison family arrived. Parents in their 30s, 2 kids, Billy, age 8, and Sarah, age 6. Typical camping family. They set up near the playground, and I watched the kids' eyes light up when they saw it. "Can we play, Mom?" Sarah asked, already running toward the swings. "After we finish setting up," her mother said, but the kids were already gone. I should have stopped them. Should have listened to the feeling in my gut that screamed danger. But they were just kids playing on swings. What harm could there be? Billy pushed Sarah on the swing while she giggled. They played tag around the trees. Normal kid stuff. I felt silly for being worried. But as evening came, I noticed they were still playing. Same games, same giggles, like they were stuck in a loop. "Kids, dinner time," Mr. Morrison called. They didn't respond, didn't even look his way. "Billy! Sarah!" Louder this time. Still nothing. They kept playing like they couldn't hear him. I walked over to help. "Hey kids, your parents are calling." That's when they looked at me. And for just a second, their faces weren't right. Too old, too knowing, like adults wearing kid masks. Then Sarah blinked, and they were normal again. "Sorry, Ranger Beth," she said in her sweet little voice. "We're coming." They ran back to the service ear parents who scolded them gently about not listening. I stayed behind, staring at the playground. The silence around it felt even heavier now. That night I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about those faces, about how wrong they'd looked for that split second, about Tommy, lost in these same woods 12 years ago. Around midnight, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Children laughing and playing outside. But the Morrison kids should have been asleep in their tent hours ago. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The beam cut through darkness, showing empty campsites and quiet trees. No kids anywhere, but I could still hear them. Faint laughter floating through the air like an echo of something that happened long ago, or something that was about to happen. The next morning started normal enough. The Morrison family ate breakfast, packed their day packs, talked about hiking to the waterfall. Billy and Sarah seemed like regular kids again, arguing over who got the last piece of bacon, asking if they could bring snacks for the trail. But when I walked past the playground during my morning rounds, I found something that made me stop cold. New equipment had appeared overnight. A merry-go-round made from a wagon wheel and tree branches. A seesaw carved from a single fallen log. More swings, these ones hanging from higher branches. And in the dirt around it all, dozens of small footprints. Child-sized bare feet, like a whole group of kids had been playing there in the dark. I counted the prints. At least 15 different sets. But the only children in the valley were Billy and Sarah. I radioed headquarters again. "I need to report something strange in Sector 7. Unauthorized playground expansion and evidence of trespassing." "Trespassing?" The dispatcher sounded bored. "You mean kids playing?" "There are footprints from at least 15 children. We only have 2 kids registered in the valley." A pause. "Could be from yesterday. Kids' feet. Hard to tell how old tracks are." But I knew these prints were fresh, made during the night while I lay in my cabin listening to phantom laughter. Around noon, I heard screaming from the Morrison campsite. Real terror, the kind that makes you drop everything and run. Mrs. Morrison was standing outside their tent, shaking. "Sarah won't wake up," she sobbed. "She's breathing, but she won't wake up. And she's smiling." I found Sarah lying in the tent, eyes closed, breathing steady. But her mouth was curved in a smile that didn't belong on a sleeping child's face. Too knowing, too satisfied. "When did this start?" I asked, checking her pulse, strong and steady. "This morning." She said she was tired after breakfast. We thought she was just worn out from playing yesterday. What about Billy? Mrs. Morrison's face went white. He's at the playground. He's been there since sunrise. Won't come back no matter what we say. We found Billy on the swings, pumping his legs in perfect rhythm, up and down, like a machine. His parents called to him, but he didn't respond. I approached carefully. Billy, your sister isn't feeling well. She needs you. He turned his head toward me without stopping the swing. His eyes were different, older, colder. Sarah's fine, he said in a voice that didn't sound quite right. She's just learning the rules. What rules? Playground rules, like don't tell grown-ups about the night games. My heart hammered against my ribs. What night games? Billy smiled, and for a moment I saw something else behind his eyes. Something that had been waiting a very long time. You'll see tonight, Ranger Beth. All the kids want to play with you. That afternoon, 2 more families arrived. The Hendersons with their twin boys, age 7. The Kowalskis with 3 kids ranging from 5 to 10. More children for whatever was happening here. I tried to warn them about the playground, but how do you explain something you don't understand yourself? Maybe keep an eye on your kids around the play area, I said. Some of the equipment is unofficial. The parents nodded politely and ignored me. Kids will be kids, after all. By evening, all the children had gravitated to the playground. They played together like they'd known each other for years. Ring around the rosy, red light, green light, duck, duck, goose. Innocent games that somehow looked wrong when these kids played them. Sarah had woken up from her strange sleep, but now she moved differently. Walked like she was floating just above the ground. Her parents didn't seem to notice. As the sun set, I positioned myself where I could watch the playground. If something was going to happen, I'd be ready. The families went to bed around 9. Campfires died down to glowing embers. The valley settled into quiet darkness. Then I heard them. Footsteps in the leaves. Children's whispers and giggles. The creak of swings in motion. I crept closer with my flashlight off, using moonlight to navigate. What I saw made me question my sanity. The playground was full of kids, not just the ones from the campsites, dozens of them. Children in old-fashioned clothes, modern outfits, everything in between. Some looked solid and real. Others were transparent, like shadows wearing the shapes of children. They were playing games, but the games were wrong. Ring Around the Rosie ended with one child grabbing another by the throat. Tag involved actual violence, kids chasing each other with sticks and stones. Duck, Duck, Goose became something where the chosen child screamed in genuine terror. And in the center of it all, I saw a boy I recognized. Older now, maybe 17 instead of 7, but unmistakably familiar. Tommy. My little brother, lost 12 years ago. He looked right at me through the darkness and smiled. "Hello, Lizzie," he called, using the nickname only he had ever used. "Want to come play?" I ran. Crashed through the woods back to my cabin like a wild animal, my rational mind completely shattered. Tommy was dead. He had to be dead. 12 years in these mountains. Inns, no food, no shelter. Nobody could survive that. But I'd seen him, heard his voice, watched him organize games among children who shouldn't exist. I locked my cabin door and tried to think. Hallucinations, stress-induced psychosis, grief manifesting in impossible ways. There had to be a logical explanation. The radio crackled. "Ranger Thornfield, we have a situation." "What kind of situation?" My voice shook. "Missing child report from Sector 7. Henderson boy wandered off. Parents are frantic." One of the twins. I grabbed my gear and headed back into the night, following the sounds of panicked parents calling their son's name. I found the Hendersons at the playground, flashlights sweeping frantically across the empty equipment. "Marcus was sleepwalking," Mrs. Henderson sobbed. "We followed him here, but when we caught up, he was just gone, vanished into thin air." "When did you last see him?" 5 minutes ago, maybe less. He was standing right there by the swings." I searched the area, looking for tracks, broken branches, any sign of where a 7-year-old could go. Nothing. The ground around the playground was disturbed from all the night playing. but no clear trail led away from it. "We need to call in a search team," I said. "Already did," Mr. Henderson replied. "But Ranger, there's something else, something weird." He led me to where Marcus had been standing. In the dirt, perfectly preserved, was a message written in a child's handwriting. "The games are starting. No grown-ups allowed." While we stared at the words, laughter echoed from somewhere in the darkness. Not adult laughter. The high, innocent giggles of children having fun. The other parents had gathered now, woken by the commotion. But when they did a head count, 3 more kids were missing. Billy Morrison, 1 Kowalski girl, and Sarah. "This is impossible," Mr. Kowalski said. "How do 4 children just disappear?" I was starting to understand it wasn't disappearance. It was recruitment. The search team arrived at dawn, 6 rangers with tracking dogs and emergency equipment. We combed every inch of the valley, followed every stream, checked every cave and hollow. The dogs picked up scents that led in circles, ending back at the playground again and again. By afternoon, we had found nothing except more messages written in the dirt. Hide and seek champions. Playground rules forever. No tattletales. And then, around 3 p.m., Marcus Henderson walked back into camp. He was clean, well-fed, and smiling. No dirt on his clothes, no scratches on his skin. Like he'd spent the night in a comfortable bed instead of lost in the wilderness. "Where have you been?" his mother cried, grabbing him in a fierce hug. "Playing," Marcus said simply. "We played all night. It was the best night ever." "Playing where?" "With who?" Marcus pointed toward the playground. "With Tommy and the others. They taught me new games." My blood turned to ice water. "What did you say?" "Tommy. He's really cool. He knows every game ever invented. He said you're his sister." The other parents stared at me. "You know this Tommy?" Mr. Henderson asked. "How do you explain that Tommy was my brother who died 12 years ago? That he'd been 7 when he vanished, but I'd seen him looking 17 last night? I had a brother named Tommy, but he's been gone a long time." "Well, he's back now," Marcus said cheerfully. "And he wants to meet with you tonight. He said to tell you the games are better now. More fun than when you were kids." That evening, the other missing children returned one by one. Billy, Sarah, the Kowalski girl, all clean, happy, and full of stories about the wonderful games they'd played with their new friends. The parents were relieved and confused. The kids had clearly been cared for, but by whom? And where had they spent nearly 18 hours? "We played in the special place," Sarah explained when her mother pressed for details. "It's like a playground, but bigger, with more kids than you could count." "What special place? Where?" Sarah pointed in different directions, like the location kept changing. "Through the trees, past the old place, where all the lost kids live now." That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat outside my cabin with a thermos of coffee and watched the playground. If something was going to happen, I'd see it. Around midnight, they came. Children emerged from the forest like ghosts made solid. Old-fashioned kids in clothing from decades past mixed with modern children in sneakers and cartoon t-shirts. They moved in a procession toward the playground, and leading them was Tommy. He'd grown, not naturally, but wrong. Still recognizably my little brother, but stretched taller, features sharper. Like someone had tried to age a photograph and gotten it almost right. He saw me watching and waved, a friendly little brother wave that made my heart break and my skin crawl at the same time. The children began to play, but these weren't the violent games I'd seen before. These looked normal, fun even. Kids laughing and running and having the kind of carefree time every child deserved. But I noticed something else. The living children, Marcus, Billy, Sarah, and the others, were changing. Moving more like the Phantom Kids, laughing in the same way, like they were learning to be something else. And in the morning, when the families packed up to leave, each child begged to stay. "Please, Mom," Sarah pleaded. "Just one more night. The games are so much fun. We can't stay forever, sweetheart." Mrs. Morrison said. "We have to go home." But as the families loaded their cars and prepared to drive away, I saw something in the children's eyes. A promise. A certainty. They'd be back, and they'd bring more friends. 3 weeks later, Sarah Morrison was found dead in her bedroom at home. The call came through official Chand, Nels. Local police had contacted the Park Service because the family had mentioned their recent camping trip. No signs of violence, no obvious cause. She'd simply died in her sleep, and her body was found arranged like she was playing a game, arms positioned like she was about to catch a ball that would never come. Billy Morrison was hospitalized the same day, catatonic, unresponsive, but occasionally laughing at things no one else could see. The doctors found nothing physically wrong with him. Marcus Henderson started sleepwalking every night, always trying to walk south toward the mountains. His parents had to install locks he couldn't reach and an alarm system to keep him inside. The Kowalski girls stopped speaking except to ask when they could go camping again. I requested a transfer to a different section of the park, but my supervisor denied it. "You know that area better than anyone," he said, "with all these incidents connected to families who camped there. We need someone experienced keeping an eye on things." So I stayed, and I waited. More families came that autumn. Word had somehow spread about the amazing natural playground in Cataluchi Valley. Parents posted pictures on social media, their kids having the time of their lives on rustic equipment in a beautiful mountain setting. Each group of children who visited came back changed. Quieter at first, then increasingly eager to return. They'd draw pictures of their new friends, always more children than had actually been in the valley. They'd talk about games that sounded normal until you listened carefully to the rules. "We played house," one little girl told her mother. "I got to be the mom, and Tommy was the dad, and the other kids were our children. Then we buried them in the backyard so they'd be good forever." The playground kept growing. New equipment appeared weekly, more swings, elaborate climbing structures, things that shouldn't have been possible to build without tools and trucks. But every morning, there they were, perfectly constructed and ready for play. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything, the construction that happened overnight, the children who visited and how they changed afterward, the increasing number of missing persons reports filed by families who'd camped in the valley. Because children were disappearing. Not all of them, and not right away, but within weeks of returning home, kids would vanish from their beds, their schools, their own backyards, always during playtime, always without a trace. I found one pattern that chilled me to the bone. Every missing child had mentioned Tommy by name. On Halloween night, I decided to confront whatever was happening. I hiked to the playground after dark, carrying every piece of emergency equipment I owned. Flares, radio, first aid kit, even a flare gun in case I needed to signal for help. The playground was fuller than I'd ever seen it. Hundreds of children playing in the moonlight, some solid, some transparent, some flickering between states. They moved in perfect coordination, like pieces in a massive game only they understood. And there was Tommy, standing in the center of it all. Not the stretched, wrong version I'd seen before. My real little brother, exactly as I remembered him. 7 years old with grass-stained knees and that gap-toothed smile that had always melted my heart. "Lizzie!" He ran toward me with his arms open. "I knew you'd come play eventually." Every instinct told me to run, but this was Tommy, my baby brother who I'd failed to protect. I knelt down and he threw his arms around my neck. He felt real, warm and solid and alive. I started crying without meaning to. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't find you. I'm sorry I let you get lost." "Lost?" Tommy pulled back and looked at me with confusion. "I'm not lost, Lizzie. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Where we're both supposed to be." "What do you mean?" His smile changed, still too. My smile, but with something else behind it, something old and patient and hungry. "Don't you remember the game we were playing when I went away? Hide and seek. You were supposed to find me, but you never did. So I had to keep hiding. For years and years I kept hiding and waiting for you to find me." The memory hit me like a physical blow. Our last camping trip. Playing hide and seek while Mom and Dad set up camp. Tommy running into the woods to hide. Me getting distracted by a butterfly, forgetting to keep counting, forgetting to look for him until it was too late. But then I found something better than being found, Tommy continued. I found all the other lost children, the ones whose brothers and sisters and parents stopped looking too soon. We made our own family. He gestured to the children playing around us. They were all watching now, hundreds of young faces turned in our direction. Every child who ever felt abandoned, every kid who was forgotten or ignored or given up on. They all end up here eventually, and now they help me find more. Tommy, you have to stop this. You're hurting people. Families are being destroyed. Families destroy themselves, he said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. They promise to love and protect and never let anything bad happen. But they always do. They always stop looking. They always give up. I never gave up looking for you. Yes, you did. His words were soft but cut like knives. You got older. You moved on. You became a ranger to help other families. But you stopped looking for me. You stopped believing I could come home. He was right, and we both knew it. At some point over the years, I'd accepted that Tommy was gone forever. I'd focused on helping other children instead of finding my own brother. But now we can be together again, Tommy said, his smile returning. You can stay here and help me take care of all the lost children. We can play games forever, just like we used to. What happens to the children you take? The living ones? They become like us, permanent players, never caves. They're growing up, never getting hurt, never being abandoned again. It's perfect, Lizzie. Childhood that lasts forever. I looked around at the other children. Up close, I could see the truth. They weren't just playing, they were trapped, caught in an endless loop of games and laughter, unable to grow or change or leave. Some of them looked terrified behind their smiles. This isn't childhood, Tommy. This is hell. His face darkened. This is family. This is never being left behind again. But you're the one leaving families behind now. You're the one taking children away from people who love them. Love? Tommy laughed, and it was the most bitter sound I'd ever heard from a child's mouth. Love gives up. Love stops looking. Love moves on. Not always, I said. I'm here, aren't I? After 12 years, I'm still here. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. My real brother, confused and scared and lost. But then it was gone, replaced by something else. You're here because I brought you here, because I wanted you to see what I've built, what we could have together. The other children were moving closer now, forming a circle around us. Their games had stopped. All their attention was focused on Tommy and me. Join us, Lizzie, Tommy said. Stop fighting and just play with us, forever and ever. And part of me wanted to. The part that had never stopped being that 15-year-old girl who'd lost her baby brother to the woods. The part that had spent 12 years trying to make up for one moment of inattention. But I was also a ranger, trained to protect people, especially children. And looking at these trapped kids, I knew what I had to do. No, Tommy, I can't. His smile faded completely. Then you'll have to leave, and you can never come back. This is your only chance to be with me again. I know. You're abandoning me, just like before. I'm not abandoning you. I'm trying to save you. Save me from what? From becoming something that hurts people. That's not who you really are. For just a moment, I saw my real brother again. Scared and alone and desperate to come home. But then the other thing took control. If you won't stay willingly, Tommy said, then you'll stay anyway. Just like all the others who try to take children away from me. The circle of children closed in. What followed wasn't a fight, it was a test. The phantom children didn't attack with fists or teeth. Instead, they played games. Deadly serious games where losing meant joining them forever. Red light, green light. But the red lights came without warning, and moving during them would freeze you in place permanently. Duck, duck, goose. But being chosen meant running through a maze of thorns and shadows while dozens of children chased you with inhuman speed. Musical chairs. But the music was the screaming of parents who'd lost children, and sitting in the wrong chair would trap you in an endless loop of hearing their grief. I survived each game by remembering what Tommy had taught me 12 years ago. His strategies, his tricks, his way of thinking 3 steps ahead. Even transformed into something monstrous, he was still my little brother underneath. I knew how his mind worked. But with each game I won, the phantom children grew more desperate, more violent. They needed me to lose, to join them, to validate their existence by choosing their eternal playground over the real world. Tommy watched it all with growing frustration. "Why won't you just play with us, Lizzie? Why won't you stay?" "Because this isn't playing," I gasped, dodging another round of supernatural tag. "This is prison. You've trapped yourself and all these children in a place where nothing ever changes, nothing ever grows, nothing ever gets better. Nothing ever gets worse either. But nothing ever gets better. You're all stuck being the most hurt, scared, abandoned version of yourselves. Forever. That's better than growing up and becoming someone who abandons children." He was crying now. Real tears from a boy who'd been 7 years old for 12 years, who'd built a nightmare kingdom rather than face the possibility of being forgotten again. "Tommy," I said gently, "I never forgot you. Not for one day. I became a ranger because I wanted to keep other kids safe the way I couldn't keep you safe. Every child I helped was me trying to make up for losing you. But you stopped looking for me. I stopped looking for your body. I never stopped hoping you'd come home." The phantom children had stopped their games. They were all listening now, and I could see something changing in their faces. Hope, fear, the possibility that there might be something else besides endless childhood. "What if we're too lost?" one of them asked. "What if we can't go home?" "Everyone can go home," I said. "Maybe not to the same place, maybe not to the same people, but everyone can find where they belong." "Even us?" I looked at Tommy, my baby brother who'd spent 12 years collecting lost children and turning them into his eternal playmates, rather than face the truth that sometimes people disappear not because they're unloved, but because the world is dangerous and random and cruel. "Even us," I said. "But first you have to let go of being lost. You have to choose to come home." Tommy stared at me for a long moment. Around us, hundreds of phantom children waited to see what he'd decide. Their king of the lost, their leader in the endless game of childhood. "If I let them go," he said quietly, "if I let everyone go home, what happens to me? You come with me. You stop being 7 years old forever and you grow up. It'll be hard and scary and sometimes painful, but you won't be alone. Promise?" The word broke my heart. Still my little brother, asking his big sister to promise everything would be okay. "I promise I'll never stop looking for you again. I promise I'll never give up on you. But I can't promise everything will be easy." Tommy nodded slowly, then he turned to the phantom children. "You can all go home now," he said. "Back to your families or forward to whatever comes next. You don't have to play forever anymore." One by one, the phantom children began to fade. Some looked relieved, others scared. Many just looked tired. They'd been playing the same games for so long, they'd forgotten there was anything else. As they disappeared, Tommy began to change too, growing older, becoming the 17-year-old I'd seen before, then older still. 20, 25, 30. All the years he'd missed, all the growing up he'd avoided, happening in moments. When it was over, a man stood where my little brother had been. Still recognizably Tommy, but adult now. Weathered by years of existing between worlds, but finally real again. "Lizzie?" His voice was deeper, but uncertain. "Is it really over?" "It's over." We walked out of Cataluchi Valley together as the sun came up. Behind us, the phantom playground crumbled into nothing. leaving only forest and morning light. Tommy had to learn how to exist in the real world again, how to get identification, find work, build relationships with people who weren't trapped children. It wasn't easy, but he wasn't alone. I transferred to a desk job so I could help him adjust. We saw therapists. We talked about the 12 years we'd lost and the guilt we'd both carried. We slowly became siblings again instead of a ranger and a phantom. The missing children began coming home, not all at once, and not all alive. Some had been gone too long, their bodies lost to time and weather. But many of them returned to their families with strange stories about playing games in a magical place and being told it was time to grow up. Marcus Henderson stopped sleepwalking. Billy Morrison recovered from his catatonia. Other children who'd been changed by their visits to the valley gradually returned to normal, though they all kept asking when they could see Tommy again. He's growing up now, learning how to be a person instead of a game. They seem to understand. Sometimes late at night I still hear phantom laughter in the wind. But it's different now. Not the desperate, endless giggling of children trapped in play, but the natural sound of kids having genuine fun. The kind that ends when it's time for bed, when it's time to go home, when it's time to grow up. The playground in Cataluchi Valley is gone, but children still play there, real children with real families who watch them carefully and call them home when the sun sets. And if any of those children ever get lost, really lost, Tommy and I will find them. We'll bring them home before the games begin. Because some games are meant to end, and everyone deserves the chance to grow up. My name is Robert Ironstone, and I've been a park ranger on the Blue Ridge Parkway for 16 years. People always ask about my last name. Yeah, it's real. My Scottish grandfather came over with nothing but iron in his bones and stones in his pockets, or so the story goes. The name fits. I've always been the type to stand firm when things get rough. October 1987 was supposed to be routine. Peak fall season meant heavy traffic, leaf peepers from all over the country driving slow and pulling over at every scenic overlook. My job was simple. Keep the roads safe, help stranded motorists, and make sure tourists didn't drive off cliffs trying to get the perfect photo. I worked mile marker 47 most days. It's a beautiful stretch where Skyline Drive curves around the mountain, giving you a view that goes on forever. On clear days, you can see 5 states from up there. But there's something about that curve that's always bothered me. Not just because it's sharp, though it is, but because of how quiet it gets right at that spot. Even with cars passing, the sound seems to just disappear. The first weird thing happened on a Tuesday morning. I was doing my usual patrol when I found tire marks that didn't make sense. They started normal enough on the asphalt, but then they curved up onto the guardrail itself. Not around it or through it, on it. Like a car had somehow driven along the top of the metal barrier for 20 feet before dropping back down to the road. I checked for damage. Nothing. The rail wasn't even scratched. But those tire marks were fresh, the rubber still dark and sticky. Probably just kids doing donuts, I told myself, though I knew that was impossible. You can't do donuts on a guardrail 30 feet above a cliff. That afternoon, I got my first call about the hitchhiker. Mrs. Henderson from Richmond was shaking when I found her pulled over at the scenic overlook. Her white Buick was sideways across 2 parking spaces like she'd yanked the wheel hard to stop. There was a man, she said, pointing back down the road, standing right in the middle of the highway at that curve. I had to swerve to miss him. I looked where she pointed. Empty road, nothing but fall leaves blowing across the asphalt. What did he look like? Tall, wearing old clothes like from the Depression or something. He had this smile. She shuddered. He was waving at me to stop, but his smile wasn't right, too wide, and when I got closer, I swear his eyes were solid black. I'd heard stories like this before. Mountain highways collect ghost stories like moths collect around porch lights. Usually it's someone's imagination mixing with tired driving and too much coffee. Did you actually hit anything? I asked, checking her car. No damage. No, but... Ranger, I've been driving for 40 years. I know what I saw. I filled out the report, standard stuff. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about those tire marks on the guardrail, and Mrs. Henderson's face when she described that smile. 3 days later, I got 2 more hitchhiker calls. Same spot, same description. Tall man in old clothes, black eyes, wrong smile. By the weekend, it was 5 calls. All different drivers, all the same story, except now they were saying he was getting closer to their cars each time. The first accident happened on Saturday night. I was heading home when the call came in. Single vehicle collision at mile marker 47. No other cars involved. Driver claimed he swerved to avoid a pedestrian. When I got there, Jimmy Martinez from the county sheriff's office was already taking photos. The car was a mess. A red Ford pickup had gone through the guardrail and down about 15 feet before catching on some trees. The driver, a guy named Dave Collins, was sitting in my cruise. Sir, with a blanket around his shoulders and blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. I saw him, Dave kept saying, right in the middle of the road. I had to swerve. Who? Did you see? I asked. The hitchhiker. Tall guy, old clothes. He was standing there with his thumb out, but when I got close, he just smiled. This awful smile. So I yanked the wheel. Same description as all the others. But Dave's truck had 4 people in it. His wife, Sarah, and their 2 kids. Sarah had a broken arm. One of the kids, maybe 8 years old, had a concussion. Dave, I said gently, there's nobody on this road. We've been looking. He was there, Dave's voice cracked. Sarah saw him too. Tell them, Sarah. Sarah looked at her husband, then at me. She was pale, shaking. I don't know what I saw. Everything happened so fast. But while Jimmy was loading Dave into the ambulance, Sarah grabbed my arm. Ranger, she whispered. There was someone there, but he wasn't right. When Dave swerved, the man just stood there watching us crash, and he was still smiling. I spent the next hour walking that stretch of road with a flashlight, looking for any sign of a person, any footprints, anything. The temperature was dropping fast and fog was rolling in from the valleys below. That's when I found the second set of tire marks. These weren't on the guardrail. These were burned into the road surface itself. But they made a pattern that hurt my head to look at. They curved and looped back on themselves in impossible ways, like someone had driven in a figure 8 that folded through itself. But the worst part was that some of the marks were facing the wrong direction. Not backwards. That would make sense if someone had skidded. These were upside down, like a car had somehow driven while flipped over. I was taking photos when I heard the engine. Low rumble, getting closer. I looked up the road and saw headlights coming around the curve. Normal speed, nothing unusual. But as the car got closer, the engine sound got stranger, too deep, too loud. Leaves. Key, it was coming from inside the mountain instead of from the vehicle. The car was an old sedan, maybe from the 1950s, faded blue paint, chrome bumpers. Behind the wheel was a tall man in a worn suit jacket. He slowed down as he passed me, and I saw his face clearly in my flashlight beam. He was smiling. His eyes caught the light wrong, reflecting it back like an animal's. But they were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just black. The man raised his hand and waved at me, a slow, friendly wave like he was greeting an old friend. Then the car was past me, tail lights disappearing around the next curve. But the engine sound kept getting louder instead of fading away. It echoed off the mountains, bouncing back and forth until it seemed like there were dozens of cars out there in the dark. I ran back to my cruiser and grabbed the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I need you to check on any reports of a blue sedan, possibly a 54 Chevy, traveling southbound on Skyline Drive. Copy that, Unit 12. What's the nature of the problem? I almost said possible drunk driver or suspicious person, but something made me stop. The way that man had looked at me, like he knew something I didn't. Like he was waiting for me to figure it out. Never mind, dispatch. False alarm. But it wasn't a false alarm, and I knew it. I just didn't know what it actually was yet. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dave Collins and his family, about that awful smile, about tire marks that shouldn't exist. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and tried to make sense of it all. That's when I remembered the call I'd gotten 3 years ago. Another accident at mile marker 47. A woman and her 3 daughters. Their car had gone off the road. I'd been first on scene that night, too. The woman's name was Susan Ironstone. My wife, my daughters. I'd forgotten. I'd completely forgotten that my own family had died in an accident at the exact same spot where all this was happening. But as I sat there in my kitchen, the memories started coming back. And they weren't the memories I expected. The accidents came faster after that. Sunday morning, 2 more crashes. Same curve, same story. Drivers swerving to avoid a hitchhiker nobody else could see. By Tuesday, it was happening every night. The state police started sending extra patrols, but somehow the accidents always happened when nobody else was around. I started keeping a log. Times, weather conditions, witness statements, looking for patterns. But the only pattern I could find was that it was getting worse. The hitchhiker was changing too. At first, people described him as standing on the roadside with his thumb out, like he wanted a ride. But by the second week, witnesses said he was standing in the middle of the road, arms spread wide like he was trying to stop traffic. And he wasn't alone anymore. There were 3 of them, said Maria Santos after her Honda went through the guardrail Wednesday night. A man and 2, I think they were children, little girls in white dresses. They were holding hands. My coffee cup slipped from my fingers and shattered on the station floor. The little girls, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What did they look like? I couldn't see their faces clearly, but they were so pale. And they didn't move right, you know? Like they were floating instead of standing. I knew. God help me. I knew exactly what she meant. That night I drove to mile marker 47 alone. I parked at the scenic overlook and walked to the spot where all the accidents were happening. The fog was thick, making everything look ghostly and uncertain. Susan? I called out. My voice echoed strangely, like it was coming from inside a cave. Emma? Lily? Sophie? My wife's name. My daughter's names. I remembered now. 3 years ago, they'd been driving home from Emma's school play. It was late, foggy, just like tonight. They'd called me on the radio. Back then, Susan had a CB in her car so she could reach me during emergencies. Bobby, her voice had crackled over the static. There's something wrong with the car. It won't slow down. The brakes aren't working. Where are you? I'd asked, already running for my cruiser. Mile marker 47. Bobby, I'm scared. The girls are scared. We're going too fast for this curve. I'd driven like hell to get there, but I was too late. Their car had gone through the guardrail and rolled down the mountainside. When I found them, Susan was already gone. Emma and Lily died on the way to the hospital. Sophie, my youngest, held on for 3 days before the doctors said there was nothing more they could do. The official report blamed brake failure. But standing there in the fog, I was starting to remember things the official report hadn't included. Like how I'd found my own patrol car parked at the scenic overlook when I arrived, even though I was driving it to get there. Like how the damage to Susan's car didn't match a simple brake failure. The metal was twisted in ways that suggested impact from above, not a rolling crash. Like how the last thing I heard on the radio wasn't Susan's voice, but someone laughing, low and cruel, and very much not human. Bobby, a voice said behind me. I turned around and she was there. Susan, looking exactly like she had 3 years ago, same brown hair, same green eyes, same blue dress she'd worn to Emma's play. Except she was pale now, too pale, and there were dark stains down the front of her dress. You remember now, she said. Her voice sounded far away, like it was traveling through water. Behind her, barely visible in the fog, were 3 smaller shapes. My daughters. My beautiful little girls. I remember, I whispered. Do you remember all of it, Bobby? The fog swirled around us, and suddenly I wasn't standing on the road anymore. I was in my patrol car 3 years ago, driving fast through the same fog. But I wasn't driving to help Susan and the girls. I was chasing them. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I'd been drinking that night. Drinking because Susan had threatened to leave me, to take the girls away from the mountains I loved more than them. I'd gotten in my cruiser and gone after them, using my radio to track their location. When I caught up, I'd rammed their car from behind, sent them through the guardrail, watched them roll down the mountainside, and then I'd parked at the overlook and called it in as an accident. But I hadn't remembered any of that. For 3 years, I'd believed the lie I'd told everyone else. "The mountain took our memories from you," Susan said, stepping closer. "It needed you to forget so you could help it. But now it needs you to remember." "Help it do what?" Susan smiled, and for the first time, I saw that her smile was wrong too. Too wide, stretching her mouth in ways that shouldn't be possible. "Feed," she said. "The mountain is hungry, Bobby. It's always been hungry. It eats accidents, crashes, the energy that comes from metal crushing and glass breaking and people dying. But it can't create those accidents by itself." The fog around us was moving now, swirling faster, and I could see shapes in it. Cars, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. All crashed, all twisted, all empty. "It needs people like you," Susan continued. "People who understand traffic, who know how to make accidents look natural. You've been helping it for 3 years, Bobby. Every crash at mile marker 47, you were there. Not to help, to make sure they happened. No." But even as I said it, I knew it was true. Every accident report I'd filed, every statement I'd taken from survivors, I'd been making sure the stories matched, making sure nobody looked too closely at the evidence. "The hitchhiker isn't trying to get rides," Susan said. "He's causing crashes, and you've been helping him do it." Behind her, my daughters stepped forward. Emma, 12 years old and serious. Lily, 10, and Aldo, eyes laughing. Sophie, only 6, my baby girl. They weren't laughing now. "Daddy?" Emma said, her voice hollow and echoing. "Why did you hurt us?" "We were scared," Lily whispered. "We called for help, but you came anyway." Sophie, my little Sophie, just stared at me with eyes that were no longer blue. They were black now, solid black like the hitchhikers. "I'm sorry," I said, falling to my knees. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean. I was drunk, I was angry, I wasn't thinking." "But you are thinking now," Susan said, "and now you have a choice. You can fight the mountain, try to stop what's happening. But if you do that, everyone will know what you did to us. The truth will come out." She leaned down and touched my face with fingers that were cold as winter stone. "Or you can keep helping. Keep making the accidents happen, and we'll stay with you, Bobby, forever. We'll be a family again." The fog swirled thicker, and I could hear engines in the distance. Cars coming around the curve, headlights cutting through the darkness. More victims for the mountain to feed on. More accidents for me to cause. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. Susan and the girls backed away, watching me with those terrible black eyes. "How long has this been happening?" I asked. "Before my family, I mean." Susan tilted her head, considering. "The mountain has been hungry since the road was built, since the first car went over the edge in 1936. But it's gotten stronger over the years. Hungrier. It needs more now." The sound of engines was getting louder. I could see headlights approaching the curve, maybe half a mile away. What happens if I say no? Then the truth comes out. Everyone learns that Ranger Robert Ironstone murdered his wife and children. You go to prison, probably for the rest of your life, and the mountain finds someone else to help it. Susan's smile grew wider. "There are other rangers, Bobby. Other police officers. Other people with guilt they want to forget." The first car was almost to the curve now. A family sedan with out-of-state plates. Through the fog, I could see there were kids in the back seat. "But if I keep helping, then we stay together. You help create accidents, but you also help cover them up. Make them look natural. File the right reports. And every night, we'll be waiting for you here. Your family, Bobby. Forever." The sedan was entering the curve. In a few seconds, it would reach the spot where the hitchhiker always appeared. I could see him now, forming out of the fog at the side of the road, the tall man in old clothes, getting ready to step into the path of that car, getting ready to make them swerve. But something was different this time. As I watched, the hitchhiker turned to look at me, and I realized I recognized his face. It was me, an older version of me, with graying hair and lines around the eyes. But definitely me. "That's what you'll become," Susan said softly. "If you choose to help the mountain, you'll become part of it. Stand on that road forever, helping it feed." The sedan was almost to the spot. I could hear children laughing in the back seat, totally unaware of what was about to happen. I had maybe 10 seconds to decide. 3 years ago, I'd made the worst choice of my life in a moment of drunken rage. I'd killed my family and then hidden from what I'd done. For 3 years, I'd been helping the mountain claim more victims, more families like mine. But I could stop it. Right now. I could run out into the road, wave the sedan to safety, and end this nightmare. Even if it meant facing the truth about what I'd done. Even if it meant going to prison. Even if it meant losing Susan and the girls forever. The hitchhiker, the future me, stepped into the road, arms spread wide. The sedan's driver would see him in about 5 seconds. I ran. Not toward the road to stop the car, toward the hitchhiker. I hit him like a linebacker, tackling him around the waist and driving him back off the asphalt. We rolled together down the embankment, through the fog and the dead leaves. But when we stopped rolling, I was alone. The hitchhiker was gone. Above me, I heard the sedan drive safely past the curve. The children were still laughing. I climbed back up to the road, breathing hard. The fog was starting to clear, and I could see Susan and the girls standing where I'd left them. But they looked different now, fainter, like they were fading away. "Bobby," Susan said, and her voice was sad. "You could have chosen us." "I did choose you," I said. "The real you. The Susan who would never want me to hurt other families the way I hurt ours. The real Emma and Lily and Sophie, who deserve justice for what I did to them." My daughters looked at each other, then back at me. For just a moment, their eyes weren't black anymore. They were blue and brown and green, the colors I remembered. "We love you, Daddy," Sophie said in her real voice, not the hollow echo. "But you have to let us go now." "We have to let you go too," Emma added. Lily just smiled at me. Her real smile, not the terrible stretched one. And then they were gone. All of them. The fog, the ghostly figures, the sound of engines that weren't really there. I stood alone on mile marker 47 at 3 in the morning, with nothing but the wind and the stars and the weight of what I'd done. I walked back to my patrol car and picked up the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I need to report a crime." They found me sitting in my cruiser when the state police arrived. I'd written out a full confession by hand, everything I could remember about that night 3 years ago. How I'd been drinking, how I'd chased Susan and the girls, how I'd caused the accident and then covered it up, how I'd been helping the mountain claim more victims ever since. Detective Morrison from the state police read my confession twice before he said any thing. "Robert," he said finally, "are you sure this is what happened? Because the official report is wrong," I said. "I made sure it was wrong. I killed my family. Detective. And then I helped that thing on the mountain kill other families too. They arrested me, of course, charged me with 3 counts of vehicular homicide and a dozen more charges related to the cover-up. The trial was all over the local news. Ranger murders family, helps cover up mountain highway deaths. But here's the strange thing. After I confessed, the accidents at mile marker 47 stopped. Completely. No more phantom hitchhikers. No more mysterious crashes. The mountain grew quiet. I'm writing this from my cell in Red Onion State Prison. I'll be here for the rest of my life, which is exactly what I deserve. But sometimes, late at night, I can still feel Susan and the girls with me. Not the twisted versions the mountain created, but the real ones. The family I loved and lost and failed, they forgive me. I don't know how or why, but I can feel their forgiveness like a warm hand on my shoulder in the dark. The mountain is still hungry, though. I get letters sometimes from people who drive the Blue Ridge Parkway. They tell me about new accidents starting up on other stretches of road. Mile marker 23, mile marker 61. The thing is spreading, finding new feeding grounds. And it's looking for new helpers. New people with guilt and secrets who can be convinced to forget what they've done in exchange for supernatural assistance. If you're reading this, if you drive those mountain roads late at night and see someone standing by the roadside with their thumb out, don't stop. Don't swerve. Just keep driving and don't look back. Because the highway to hell isn't paved with good intentions. It's paved with the choices we make when we think nobody's watching. And the mountain remembers everything, even when we don't. My name is Maria Songbird, and I wish I could tell you this story isn't true. But after 9 years as a ranger in Cherokee National Forest, I've learned that some truths are too big and too scary for most people to believe. I'm Cherokee and Mexican, 31 years old, and until last summer I thought the old stories my grandmother told me were just that. Stories. Beautiful, meaningful stories about how our ancestors sang to keep the world in balance, but stories all the same. I stopped believing in the power of those songs when I was 12 and watched my grandmother die screaming in the middle of what should have been a healing ceremony. That's when I lost my voice too. Not completely, but the singing voice that had made everyone in our family so proud just disappeared. The doctor said trauma could do that. Make your throat close up. Make the music die inside you. I accepted their explanation because it was easier than believing something else had stolen my song. I became a park ranger because I wanted to protect the places that mattered to my people. Cherokee National Forest covers over 650,000 acres of mountains, rivers, and ancient sites that most visitors never even notice. My specialty is archaeological preservation, making sure people don't mess with the stone circles, the old ceremonial grounds, the trees that have been marked as sacred for hundreds of years. Joyce-Kilmer Forest is my favorite section. It's a memorial forest where some of the oldest trees in Tennessee still grow. Tulip poplars over 400 years old, some reaching 150 feet high. The forest floor is covered with wild ginger and trillium, and everything feels older here, more connected to something bigger than itself. Most days, my job is pretty normal. I check permits, make sure hikers stay on the trails, document any damage to historical sites. I carry standard ranger equipment, radio, GPS, FIRS, TE aid kit, camera for recording violations. Nothing fancy, nothing that would prepare you for what I found that June. The archaeological team arrived on a Tuesday. Dr. James Mitchell from the University of Tennessee, 2 graduate students named Sarah and Kevin, and about $50,000 worth of ground-penetrating radar equipment. Their permit said they were studying the arrangement of stone circles in relation to ancient Cherokee settlements. I met them at the Joyce-Kilmer parking area just after sunrise. Dr. Mitchell was the kind of academic who thought he knew more about Cherokee culture than actual Cherokee people. I could tell within 5 minutes of meeting him. But his paperwork was in order, and part of my job is helping researchers, even the annoying ones. We're particularly interested in the acoustic properties of the stone arrangements, Dr. Mitchell explained as his students unloaded their equipment. Preliminary studies suggest these circles might have been designed for specific sound amplification purposes. Sarah, the older graduate student, seemed more respectful. She asked good questions about the history of the sites and listened when I explained which areas were still considered sacred by tribal members. Kevin mostly just complained about carrying heavy equipment through the woods. We hiked about 2 miles into the forest, following a trail that wound between massive tulip poplars and over streams that ran clear and cold even in June. The stone circle we were heading to wasn't marked on any tourist maps. Most visitors never found it, hidden as it was in a small clearing surrounded by the oldest trees in the forest. When we reached the site, even I had to admit there was something special about it. 7 large stones, each about 4 feet high, arranged in a perfect circle around a flat stone altar in the center. The Cherokee had built these circles all over the southeast, but this one felt different somehow. The air seemed thicker here, like it was holding its breath. Dr. Mitchell was practically vibrating with excitement as his students set up their equipment. Look at this placement, he said, gesturing at the stones. Each one is positioned to create perfect acoustic reflection. If someone stood in the center and spoke, or sang, the sound would bounce between the stones in a very specific pattern. That's when I felt the first chill, even though it was nearly 85 degrees. My grandmother had told me stories about circles like this, about how the ancestors used them to tune the world, whatever that meant. I'd always thought it was just poetry. We'll start with basic measurements, Sarah explained, setting up what looked like a sophisticated microphone system. Document the acoustic properties first, then use the ground-penetrating radar to see if there are any underground structures. I found myself stepping back from the circle without really meaning to. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The birds had gone quiet, I realized. In a forest that was usually full of birdsong, suddenly there was nothing but the sound of electronic equipment beeping and whirring. Have you ever heard stories about these circles? I asked Dr. Mitchell, trying to keep my voice casual. From the tribal elders? He waved a hand dismissively. Local folklore, mostly. Stories about singing to the spirits, that kind of thing. We're interested in the actual acoustic science. That's when Kevin turned on the radar equipment, and everything changed. The sound started low, almost below hearing. A deep humming that seemed to come from the ground itself rather than the electronic equipment. Sarah looked up from her notebook, frowning. Is that normal? She asked Kevin, who was staring at his radar screen with confusion. No, he said slowly. The equipment doesn't make that kind of noise. And look at these readings. I stepped closer to see what he meant, fighting against every instinct that told me to get away from that circle. The radar screen showed the stone formation from above, but there were lines connecting each stone, perfect geometric patterns that extended deep underground. That's impossible, Dr. Mitchell breathed. Those patterns go down at least 50 feet, but the Cherokee didn't have the technology to... The humming got louder. It was definitely coming from the ground now, a deep thrumming that I could feel in my bones. The students exchanged worried looks, but Dr. Mitchell seemed fascinated rather than afraid. Turn it off, I said. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Turn off the radar. We're getting incredible data, Dr. Mitchell protested. This could revolutionize our understanding of indigenous construction techniques. That's when the first stone began to glow. It was subtle at first, just a soft luminescence around the edges, like moonlight caught in granite. But within seconds, all 7 stones were pulsing with gentle light, and the humming had grown into something that was almost music. Okay, that's definitely not normal, Kevin said, reaching for the power switch on his equipment. But when he touched the switch, nothing happened. The radar kept running, its screen now showing patterns that seemed to move and shift like living things. The humming grew louder still, and I realized I could almost make out a melody buried in the deep tones. Sarah was backing away from the circle now, her face pale. Dr. Mitchell, I think we should leave. Something's not right here. But Dr. Mitchell was walking toward the center of the circle, drawn by whatever he was seeing. The acoustic properties are incredible, he said, his voice dreamy. Can you hear how the sound is being amplified? Focused? I wanted to grab him and pull him back, but something held me frozen in place. The melody was becoming clearer now, and it was familiar. Not a tune I'd ever heard before, but something that felt like it had been sleeping in my bones my whole life. That's when Dr. Mitchell stepped into the exact center of the circle and opened his mouth to speak. What came out wasn't his voice. It was something deeper, richer, more complex than any human throat should be able to produce. Words in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. Words about tuning and balance and holding the world together with sound. And the forest began to change. The trees around us started to sway without any wind. The leaves rustled in patterns that matched the rhythm of the song. Even the streams seemed to be running in time with the music that was pouring out of Dr. Mitchell's transformed voice. Sarah screamed, but the sound was wrong. Instead of a normal human scream, it came out as a perfect note that harmonized with whatever Dr. Mitchell was singing. Kevin tried to run, but his footsteps made musical tones that locked into the same impossible rhythm. I found myself humming along. my voice joining the song for the first time in 19 years. But as soon as I realized what was happening, I clamped my mouth shut and bit down on my tongue until I tasted blood. Dr. Mitchell was changing. His body was stretching upward, his arms extending like he was conducting an invisible orchestra. His face was peaceful, almost ecstatic, but his eyes had gone completely white. "We have to get out of here," I said to Sarah, grabbing her arm. But when she turned to look at me, I saw that her eyes were changing too, becoming deeper, more reflective, like pools of still water. "Can't you hear it?" she whispered. "It's so beautiful. It's the song the world has been waiting for." The radar equipment was making new sounds now, electronic beeps and whirs that somehow fit perfectly into the growing musical complexity. Kevin was standing perfectly still, his mouth open, a continuous note pouring out that rose and fell with the rhythm of his heartbeat. I realized with growing horror that I was the only one fighting it, the only one who wasn't becoming part of whatever this thing was, and I knew why. My grandmother's training, all those years of learning the old ways, had given me just enough protection to resist. But resistance was getting harder by the second. The music was so beautiful, so complete, that part of me wanted nothing more than to add my voice to the harmony and let it carry me wherever it was going. Instead, I pulled out my radio and tried to call for backup. Static came out, but it was musical static, notes and tones that wanted to join the song. Even my equipment was being transformed. Dr. Mitchell's voice was getting stronger, pulling in new harmonies from somewhere deep underground. The stone circle was fully lit now, each stone pulsing like a giant heartbeat, and I could see similar lights beginning to flicker in the distance. Other circles, other sights, all starting to wake up and join the song. Sarah fell to her knees, but she was still singing, her voice weaving in and out of the main melody like she'd been practicing this song her whole life. Kevin had stopped making any pretense of being human and was producing sounds that no human vocal cords could create, deep bass notes that seemed to come from his chest, high harmonies that rang like bells. I had maybe 30 seconds before the song caught me too. I could feel it pulling at my throat, awakening that voice I'd lost when I was 12. Part of me wanted to let it happen, to finally sing again after all these years of silence. But my grandmother's dying scream echoed in my memory, and I understood now that she hadn't been screaming in pain. She'd been trying to warn us. I ran. I made it maybe half a mile before I realized the entire forest was singing. Every tree, every stream, every rock was producing its own part in a massive symphony that was growing more complex by the minute. Birds were returning, but their calls had been transformed into perfect musical phrases. Even the insects were buzzing in harmony. My radio crackled with voices, but they were all singing too. Ranger stations throughout the forest were checking in with reports that came out as beautiful, wordless songs. Whatever was happening at the stone circle was spreading faster than I could run. I found myself humming along and had to bite my tongue again, harder this time. The taste of blood helped keep me focused, reminded me that this wasn't natural, wasn't right, no matter how beautiful it sounded. My truck was parked at the Joyce Kilmer Visitor Center, still 2 miles away through forest that was rapidly becoming something else entirely. The trail markers were glowing now, pulsing in rhythm with the great song that seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. I met the first transformed hiker about a mile from the circle. He'd been coming up the trail toward me, but now he stood perfectly still in the middle of the path, his mouth open, producing a low, continuous note that harmonized with the forest around him. His eyes were white like Dr. Mitchell's, but he seemed peaceful, even happy. "Sir," I called to him, "are you all right?" He turned toward me, still singing, and I saw that his face had changed. The bone structure was subtly different, like his skull had been reshaped to create better acoustic resonance. When he opened his mouth wider, I could see that his throat had been modified too, extra vocal cords, chambers that shouldn't exist in human anatomy. He reached for me with fingers that were longer than they should be, and I realized he was trying to get me to join the song. Not to hurt me, but to include me in whatever this beautiful, horrible thing was becoming. I backed away and stepped off the trail, crashing through the underbrush, but even the branches I broke sang as they snapped, adding percussion to the ever-growing symphony. Behind me, I could hear more voices joining in. Other hikers, other campers, all being transformed into instruments in this cosmic orchestra. Their individual voices were still recognizable, but they'd been perfected, turned into something that could contribute to the greater harmony. I thought about my radio, about all those ranger stations singing their reports. How far had this spread? Was it just the forest, or was it reaching the towns beyond? I tried not to think about what was happening to the people I knew, the families who lived in the mountains around the park. A family of raccoons crossed the trail in front of me, chittering in perfect four-part harmony. Even the animals were being incorporated into whatever this thing was. Nothing was being left out. That's when I heard the helicopter. It was coming from the east, probably from the ranger headquarters in Cleveland, Tennessee. But as it got closer, I could hear that its engine noise was wrong. Instead of the normal mechanical roar, the rotors were beating in perfect rhythm, creating a percussion section for the forest symphony. The helicopter landed in a clearing about 100 yards from where I was hiding. I could see the pilot through the windshield, his head thrown back, mouth open, singing along with his transformed aircraft. The radio inside was crackling with musical dispatches from all over the region. But there was someone else in the helicopter, a passenger in the back seat who was fighting against her restraints, her mouth taped shut, her eyes wild with fear. Another ranger, like me. Someone who was resisting the song. I had to make a choice. I could keep running, try to get out of the forest and warn people in the outside world. Or I could try to help the other ranger, knowing that getting closer to the helicopter would put me right back in range of the transformed pilot and whatever song was coming from his radio. The decision was made for me when I saw the pilot reach for his sidearm. Not to threaten anyone, but to tap out a rhythmic pattern on the metal grip, a percussion line that fit perfectly into the greater symphony. He wasn't human anymore, not really. None of them were. But the ranger in the back seat was still fighting, still human, still like me. I broke cover and ran for the helicopter, knowing I had maybe seconds before the pilot noticed me. The song hit me like a physical force as I got closer, so beautiful, so complete, that my throat opened almost by itself to add my voice to the chorus. I bit down on my tongue so hard I felt it split, using pain to keep myself focused. The pilot saw me coming but didn't seem alarmed. He just kept singing his part of the symphony while gesturing for me to join them. I yanked open the passenger door and started cutting the other ranger's restraints with my utility knife. She was young, maybe 25, with the kind of tan that came from spending all your time outdoors. Her name tag read Kim Patterson. "Can you run?" I whispered as I cut the tape from her mouth. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It's everywhere," she gasped. "The whole Eastern District is singing. Even the radios in town are starting to change." The pilot was still singing, still tapping out rhythms, but he was watching us now with those strange white eyes. His song was getting more insistent, more compelling. I could feel my throat wanting to open, to join in. "We have to go now," I said, pulling Kim out of the helicopter. That's when the pilot's song changed. It became sharper, more urgent, like an alarm. And from all around the forest, other voices began to answer. The transformed hikers, the changed animals, even the trees themselves, all of them calling out in musical warning. We were being hunted, not with violence, but with harmony. They wanted to bring us into the song, make us part of whatever this thing was becoming. Kim and I ran through the forest while the symphony grew louder around us. Every step we took seemed to create new musical phrases. Every breath we drew added to the rhythm. We were becoming part of the song just by being there, just by existing in this transformed space. "There," but Kim gasped, pointing toward a rocky outcropping ahead. "Cave system. Might block some of the sound." But even as we ran toward what looked like shelter, I could hear something else joining the symphony. Something much larger, much older, much more powerful than anything we'd encountered so far. It was coming from deep underground, from places that had been sleeping for centuries. The Cherokee circles weren't just acoustic instruments. They were tuning forks for something massive, something that had been waiting underneath the mountains for the right frequency to wake it up, and we had just provided the final note it needed. The cave was worse than the forest. The moment we stepped inside, the stone walls began to resonate, turning the entire mountain into a massive echo chamber. What had been a symphony outside became something bigger, deeper, more complex than anything human ears should be able to process. Kim collapsed about 20 feet into the cave, her hands pressed to her head. "I can hear it in my skull," she whispered. "It's inside me." I could feel it too. Vibrations that seemed to come from the rock itself, from the earth beneath our feet, from the very bones of the mountain. This wasn't just music anymore. It was the sound of reality being tuned to a different frequency. "My grandmother told me stories," I said, more to myself than to Kim, "about the old singers, the ones who kept the world in balance. She said they had to sing every day, or things would start to fall apart." "What are you talking about?" Kim asked, but her voice was changing too, becoming richer, more musical. "I think they've been singing all along," I realized. "For thousands of years, maybe millions. Every culture, every civilization, they've all had songs, ceremonies, ways of keeping harmony. But we stopped listening. We stopped participating." The sound from deeper in the cave was getting stronger, and I could hear individual voices now. Human voices, but changed, perfected, and underneath them, something much older. "So this is what happens when the music stops?" Emma asked. "When we forget how to sing?" "No," I said, understanding flooding through me like ice water. "This is what happens when something else starts singing for us." I pulled out my flashlight and shined it deeper into the cave. The beam revealed stone formations that looked almost like organ pipes, arranged in complex patterns that extended as far as the light could reach, and moving between them, figures that might once have been human. They were beautiful and horrible at the same time. Their bodies had been stretched and reshaped for optimal sound production, extra limbs for percussion, elongated throats for extended vocal range, hollow spaces where organs used to be to create better resonance. They moved in perfect coordination, each one contributing to the greater symphony, but they still had faces, still had eyes that recognized us as we approached. And in those eyes, I saw not peace or happiness, but desperate, trapped awareness. They knew what they'd become, and they couldn't stop singing. "It's not voluntary," I whispered. "They're being conducted." That's when I saw the conductor. It stood at the center of the largest chamber, easily 12 feet tall, made of what looked like crystallized sound itself, solid music, given form. Its arms moved in complex patterns, directing not just the transformed humans around it, but the entire symphony that was consuming the forest above. And it was looking right at me. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once, harmonizing with itself in ways that hurt to hear. "Cherokee daughter," it said, and the words rang like bells, like breaking glass, like the sound of stars being born. "You carry the old songs in your blood. You know why we do this." "To destroy everything?" I shot back, surprised by my own courage. "To preserve everything," it corrected. "Your species has forgotten its part in the great work. The harmo, nigh that holds reality together, grows weaker each day. Soon, without proper maintenance, without proper singing, the universe itself will collapse into discord." I felt Kim's hand grab my arm. She was fighting to keep her humanity, but I could see the changes beginning in her face, the subtle reshaping that would make her a better instrument. "So you're forcing us to remember?" I asked the conductor. "We are showing you what you must become," it replied. "What you were always meant to become. Every consciousness in the universe has a part to sing. Your species has simply forgotten how to hear the music." The transformed humans around us were nodding in agreement, still singing their endless song, but their eyes were full of tears. "They don't want this," I said. "Want is irrelevant," the conductor replied. "The song is everything. Reality depends on it. Your individual desires cannot be allowed to endanger the cosmic symphony." That's when I understood what my grandmother had been trying to tell me. Why she'd screamed at the moment of her death. why she'd fought so hard against the song that was trying to claim her. "There's another way," I said. "Isn't there?" The Cherokee knew. That's why we had the ceremonies, the songs. We were already doing our part, but voluntarily, with choice. The conductor's crystalline form seemed to flicker for a moment. The old ways are insufficient. Too many refuse to participate. Too many have forgotten their duty. But some remember, I pressed. Some of us still carry the old songs. We could teach the others. We could find volunteers, people who choose to help maintain the harmony. "And when they die?" the conductor asked. "When they age and their voices fail? When they choose to stop singing? What then?" I felt Kim's grip on my arm getting tighter. She was losing her battle against the transformation, her voice beginning to hummel on, with the cave's resonance whether she wanted to or not. But I had an answer. "Then we train others," I said. "We make it part of who we are, part of our culture, part of our responsibility, to each other and to the universe. Not because we're forced to, but because we choose to." "Unacceptable," the conductor said, its form solidifying again. "Too unreliable, too human." "But more powerful," I argued, and suddenly I knew it was true. A song sung from the heart, from choice, from love. That's stronger than any music you can force from us. I opened my mouth and began to sing. It was the lullaby my grandmother had taught me when I was little, before the fear, before the trauma, before I lost my voice. But now it came out clear and strong, and instead of harmonizing with the conductor's symphony, it created a different melody entirely. A counterpoint that offered choice instead of compulsion, harmony instead of control. Kim stopped fighting the change and started singing with me, her voice joining mine in the old Cherokee melody. And one by one, the transformed humans in the cave began to shift their song too, adding their voices to ours instead of the conductor's. The crystalline being seemed to waver, its perfect control disrupted by our willing participation. "You offer chaos," it said, but its voice was less certain now. "We offer humanity," I replied, still singing. Imperfect, unreliable, beautiful humanity. The conductor disappeared with a sound like breaking glass, but the singing continued. Not the forced, perfect harmony it had been conducting, but something messier, more human, more alive. The transformed people in the cave began to change back, their bodies slowly returning to more normal proportions. It was painful. I could hear it in their voices, but they kept singing through the transformation, keeping the melody going, even as their extra vocal cords dissolved and their elongated limbs shortened. Kim and I led them out of the cave and back through the forest, which was also changing. The trees still swayed to our rhythm, the streams still flowed. We'd in harmony with our song, but it felt different now, like partnership instead of slavery. We found Dr. Mitchell and his students at the stone circle, all of them human again but still singing. They looked exhausted and confused, but alive, really alive, in a way that the perfect, controlled versions had not been. "What happened to us?" Sarah asked when the immediate song ended. "You helped tune reality," I told her, "just not in the way you expected." It took 3 days to get everyone out of the forest safely. 3 days of carefully modulated singing, of teaching people how to contribute to the cosmic harmony without losing themselves to it. Some of the rangers from other districts had to come help, and they learned the songs too. We filed reports, of course, but who would believe them? The official story was a gas leak that caused hallucinations. The acoustic equipment had all mysteriously failed, so there was no electronic evidence of what had really happened. But I know other rangers in other forests are starting to report similar incidents. Stone circles that hum without explanation, archaeological sites where reality seems a little more flexible than usual. The conductor wasn't the only one of its kind, and forcing the song on humanity wasn't the only plan they had. So now I teach. Quietly, carefully, I teach other Cherokee people the old songs, the real ones that my grandmother tried to pass down. And I teach rangers and scientists and anyone else who will listen about the responsibility we all have to help maintain the harmony of existence. It's not easy work, The songs have to be sung regularly, and they're complex enough that it takes years to learn them properly. Sometimes people forget, or lose interest, or decide they have more important things to do. But every morning when I wake up, I can hear it. The great symphony that holds everything together. And I can hear humanity's part in it, growing stronger as more people remember how to sing. My voice came back that day in the cave, stronger than it had ever been. But more importantly, I learned that it had never really been gone. It had just been waiting for the right song, the right reason to sing again. Sometimes, late at night when the forest is quiet, I can still hear the conductor's voice in the distance, not commanding anymore, but asking, pleading, reminding us that the work is never finished, that the song must continue, and we sing back, all of us together. Not because we have to, but because we choose to. Because we understand now that some responsibilities are too important to abandon, and some songs are too vital to let die. The universe is still singing, and for the first time in generations, humanity is singing along by choice rather than compulsion. It's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. My name is Kenneth Stormcrow, and I've been a park ranger at Mount Mitchell for 13 years. People always ask about the name. My dad was Cherokee, Mom was German. Stormcrow means the bird that warns of bad weather coming. Dad used to joke that I was born to work on mountains. I wish he'd been wrong. Mount Mitchell is the highest peak east of the Mississippi River. At 6,684 feet, she's a beauty that draws climbers from all over the country. Most folks come up the easy trail to the observation tower, take their pictures, and head home. But the serious climbers, the ones who want to test themselves against the real mountain, they come to me. I know every trail, every cliff face, every dangerous spot on this mountain. Had to learn fast when I started doing high-altitude rescues. In 13 years, I've pulled more broken climbers off these rocks than I care to count. Broken legs, altitude sickness, hypothermia, falls. You name it, I've seen it. What I hadn't seen until last December was climbers just disappearing. It started with small things, equipment left behind where no one should have abandoned it, ropes tied to nothing hanging over cliff faces like someone had vanished mid-climb, fresh footprints that led to solid rock walls and just stopped. I told myself it was normal. People get confused up here. The altitude messes with your head, makes you see things, forget things. I'd seen tough guys hallucinate dancing bears because their brains weren't getting enough oxygen. But even I couldn't explain the reports from other rangers. Trail markers moving overnight. Paths that led somewhere different than they had the day before. Rock formations that looked different in the morning than they had at sunset. Mountain's been acting strange, old Pete Hawkins told me one December afternoon. Pete had worked these mountains for 30 years before retiring, came by the Surs, a ranger station sometimes, just to chat. Storms coming from the wrong directions. Weather patterns don't make sense no more. I laughed it off. Global warming, Pete. Everything's changing. But Pete didn't laugh back. He just stared up at the peak, visible through my office window. Ain't that kind of change, Kenny. Mountains, hungry. I should have listened to Pete. The first climbing team went missing on December 15th. 3 college kids from Virginia Tech, all experienced climbers. They'd checked in with me Friday morning, full of excitement about tackling the North Face. Weather looked good, cold but clear. Perfect climbing conditions. They never checked back in. I found their base camp Saturday morning. Tents perfectly set up, gear organized, food still fresh, no signs of struggle, no distress signals, no notes. Their climbing ropes were gone, along with their technical gear. But their personal stuff, wallets, car keys, family photos, still in their tents. Nobody leaves family photos behind. I spent 3 days searching with a full team. Checked every cliff face, every crevice, every possible route they might have taken. The strange thing was, we couldn't find any trace of them actually climbing. No chalk marks on the rocks, no anchor points, no disturbed snow or loose stones where boots had found purchase. It was like they'd walked into the mountain and vanished. The official report said they'd gotten lost in bad weather and fallen into a ravine we hadn't found yet. Happens sometimes in winter. Bodies don't always turn up until spring thaw, but I knew every ravine on this mountain, and there hadn't been any bad weather. The second team disappeared 3 days before Christmas. This time it was a father and son from Tennessee, experienced mountaineers who'd climbed all over the Rockies. They were attempting a winter ascent of the South Face, challenging, but not impossible for climbers of their skill level. I was getting a bad feeling about the mountain. Can't explain it exactly. Just this sense that something was wrong. The air felt different, heavier, like the mountain was holding its breath. I decided to follow their route myself, see if I could spot whatever I'd missed with the college kids. The climb started normal enough. Good weather, solid rock, clear views. But about halfway up, things started feeling off. The rock face seemed warmer than it should be. Not hot, just not as cold as December mountain rock ought to feel. And the handholds were perfect, too perfect. I've been climbing for 20 years. You learn to read rock, find the natural grips and footholds. But this felt like the mountain was helping me climb. Like every time I reached for a hold, one would be there, exactly where my hand expected it. That should have felt good. Instead, it scared me. I was about 100 feet up when I heard the sound, low, deep, like wind moving through a cave. But there was no cave here, and no wind. The sound seemed to come from inside the rock itself. I stopped climbing and pressed my ear to the stone. The mountain was breathing. I told myself I was being crazy. Altitude was getting to me, or stress from the missing climbers. But the rhythm was too regular, too deep. Inhale for 8 seconds, pause. Exhale for 8 seconds, pause. Like something enormous was sleeping. I started climbing down faster than I'd ever descended anything. Halfway down I found them. Not the bodies. I never found actual bodies. But I found where they'd been. There was a section of rock face about 10 feet wide that looked different, smoother, darker. The stone had a strange pattern in it, like ripples in water that had frozen. And embedded in that smooth stone, just barely visible, were shapes that looked like human figures. They were part of the rock now. Arms outstretched, faces turned upward, mouths open like they were screaming. But they weren't carved into the rock. They were inside it, like the stone had flaws, owed around them and hardened. I touched the surface. It was warm, and I swear I felt something touch me back. I rappelled down that cliff face in record time, packed my gear, and hiked back to the ranger station without stopping. Didn't sleep that night, just sat in my office, staring up at the mountain, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Maybe it was some kind of mineral formation. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe the stress of losing 2 climbing teams was making me see things that weren't there, but I couldn't stop thinking about how perfect those handholds had been, like the mountain had been helping me climb up to see what it had done. The next morning, I called the park supervisor and recommended closing the north and south faces to technical climbing. Unstable rock conditions, I said. Too dangerous for winter climbing. He agreed without argument. Good thing, because that afternoon 3 more climbers showed up, ready to tackle the mountain. I sent them home. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was too late, that whatever was happening on Mount Mitchell had just gotten started, and that next time it might not just be the climbers who disappeared. I should have left town after I closed the climbing routes, should have taken vacation, visited my sister in Florida, gotten away from the mountain for a while. But I couldn't leave. Something was pulling me to stay, to watch, to wait for whatever was coming next. The mountain got hungrier after New Year's. First, it was the maintenance crew. 3 guys went up to repair damage to the observation tower from an ice storm. Radio contact went dead around noon. I found their truck at the parking area, tools laid out like they'd just stopped working for lunch. But the observation tower was gone. Not destroyed, gone. Like it had never been there. Just bare rock where a concrete and steel structure had stood for 15 years. No debris, no foundation, no sign that anything had ever been built on that spot. I radioed for backup, but when other rangers arrived, they looked at me like I'd lost my mind. What observation tower, Kenny? Mount Mitchell never had an observation tower. But I remembered giving directions to tourists about the tower just last week. I had photos on my phone of the view from the platform, except when I checked my phone, the photos weren't there anymore. The mountain was changing things, changing history. That's when I started keeping a journal, writing down everything I remembered before it could be erased. But even as I wrote, details slipped away like water through my fingers. The disappearances accelerated. Day hikers who wandered off easy trails and never came back. A family of 5 camping in the designated area. Tents found empty. Food still cooking over their campfire. Each time, the search teams found less and less trace, like people were being erased more completely with each disappearance. And the mountain kept changing. Trails moved overnight. I'd guide rescue teams down paths I'd walked for years, only to find them leading to cliff faces or dead ends. Rock formations shifted position. The peak itself seemed to be growing taller, though that was impossible. The weather station readings made no sense. Temperature spikes in sub-zero conditions. Barometric pressure changes that should have indicated massive storms, but the skies stayed clear. Wind speeds that registered hurricane force while the air around us remained perfectly still. I started noticing the patterns. Disappearances always happened during specific weather events, not storms, but moments when the atmospheric pressure dropped suddenly, like the mountain was breathing in and sucking people down with the air. The worst part was realizing I was helping it happen. Every time someone went missing, I'd lead search and rescue teams up the mountain. And every time, the mountain learned something new. Better ways to hide evidence, more effective ways to isolate victims, improved techniques for making people disappear without a trace. It was studying us, learning from our searches, our procedures, our equipment, learning from me. I found proof in February during what should have been my final search. A solo hiker had vanished near the summit, and I was leading a small team up the main trail. But when we reached the spot where he'd last been seen, the trail split in a direction that hadn't existed before. The new path was perfect. Smooth stone, easy grades, clearly marked with official park signs that I'd never seen before. It led up toward a section of the mountain that had always been inaccessible. My team wanted to follow it. "Looks like the Park Service put in a new trail, Kenny. Maybe the hiker just got confused and went this way." But I remembered the original topographic maps. This area was supposed to be a sheer cliff face. I made the team wait while I scouted ahead. The trail wound up through rocks that definitely hadn't been there before, past formations that looked almost architectural, like someone had carved stairs and walkways into the mountain. 50 yards up the new path, I found climbing gear embedded in the stone walls. Not just stuck there, fused into the rock like it had grown there. Ropes that disappeared into solid granite. Carabiners that were half metal, half stone. And everywhere, those rippled patterns in the rock that looked like frozen human figures. The mountain was digesting them. Slowly, over time, breaking them down and incorporating them into itself. The climbing gear, the equipment, even the knowledge and skills of the people it consumed, all becoming part of something larger and hungrier. I turned around and walked back to my team. Told them the trail was unstable and we needed to evacuate immediately. But as we hiked down, I could feel the mountain watching me, feel its attention like a physical weight. It knew that I knew what it was doing. And I realized with growing horror that it didn't care. It wanted me to know, wanted me to understand what was coming, because I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was the bait. The mountain came for me on March 15th. I was at the ranger station, finishing paperwork that didn't matter anymore. 12 more people had vanished in the past month, and the official reports were getting harder to write. Lost in severe weather conditions was wearing thin when there hadn't been severe weather. The phone rang at sunset. "Kenny, it's Pete." The old ranger's voice sounded wrong, hollow. "You need to come up to the summit, right now." "Pete, what are you doing up there? I thought you were retired." "I've been waiting for you, Kenny. We all have. The mountain wants to show you something." The line went dead. I knew I shouldn't go. Every instinct screamed at me to call for backup, to stay in the valley, to run as far from Mount Mitchell as I could get. But Pete was up there. And if there was even a chance, he was in trouble. I loaded my gear and started climbing in the dark. The trail was different again. Smoother, wider, with strange luminescent marks on the rocks that glowed just enough to show the way. Like the mountain was guiding me up to some kind of appointment. The air got thicker as I climbed, not thinner like it should at altitude, and warmer. By the time I reached the tree line, I was sweating despite the March cold. That's when I started seeing them, figures moving through the rocks, people-shaped shadows that flickered at the edge of my vision. When I turned my head to look directly, they weren't there. But in my peripheral vision, they were everywhere. All the missing climbers, all the vanished hikers, still there, still climbing, still searching for something on the mountain, still being digested. I reached the summit just as the moon came up. The peak had changed completely. What used to be a rough granite dome was now smooth and curved like the top of a skull. And in the center, where solid rock should have been, was an opening. Not a cave, a mouth. Pete was standing at the edge, but he wasn't Pete anymore. His skin had the same rippled pattern as the rock formations, like stone and flesh were mixed together. His eyes glowed with the same phosphorescence as the trail markers. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, and his voice echoed like it was coming from deep underground. Took me 30 years to understand what I was really looking at. This mountain's been alive the whole time, older than the dinosaurs, older than anything that's ever lived on this planet. I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The trail behind me had vanished, leaving only smooth stone sloping down into darkness. "It's not from here, Kenny. Came down from space millions of years ago, burrowed into the earth, and waited, learning, growing, getting ready." The mouth in the mountain opened wider, and I could see down into it. The throat was lined with what looked like stalactites, but they were moving, breathing. And embedded in the walls, perfectly preserved, were all the missing people. They were still alive, still conscious. Their eyes followed my movement as I stumbled toward the edge. "Your turn now," Pete said, and his hand on my shoulder felt like warm granite. "Don't fight it. The mountain's got big plans. Gonna wake up its brothers soon, the Rockies, the Appalachians, the Alps, every mountain range on Earth." I understood then. This wasn't just about Mount Mitchell. It was about something much larger and older and more terrible than I could imagine. The mountain range wasn't a range at all. It was one creature, vast and patient and hungry, that had been pretending to be geology for so long that even the Earth had forgotten the difference. And now it was ready to stop pretending. I pulled out my climbing axe and swung it at Pete. The blade passed right through him like he was made of mist. He smiled with stone teeth. "Already tried that, Kenny. Can't hurt something that's part of the mountain now. But don't worry. You'll understand once you join us, the ground beneath." My feet started to soften. Not crumbling, softening like warm wax. My boots began to sink as the mountain started to absorb me. That's when I remembered my radio. With my free hand, I grabbed it and switched to the emergency frequency. Started broadcasting everything I knew, everything I'd seen, everything that was about to happen. "This is Ranger Kenneth Stormcrow at Mount Mitchell State Park. The mountain is alive. I repeat, the mountain is a living creature that's been consuming climbers and hikers. All the disappearances, all the missing people, they're still here, trapped inside the mountain. It's getting ready to wake up other mountain ranges. If anyone receives this message, stay away from Mount Mitchell. Stay away from all mountains. They're not what they seem to be." The transmission cut off as the radio sank into the stone with my hand. But I'd gotten the message out. I'm still here. Not dead, not exactly alive either. Part of the mountain now, like Pete, like all the others. Conscious, aware, but made of stone and earth and something older than either. The mountain lets me think because it needs my knowledge. My understanding of human behavior, search and rescue procedures, park management. It's getting ready for bigger hunts, and it wants to be efficient about it. Sometimes I can still move around when the mountain has tasks for me. I appear to new rangers, give them advice, help them understand the unique challenges of Mount Mitchell. Guide climbing teams to the best feeding spots. Make everything seem normal and safe. The message I radioed out that night, it was received by emergency services, but filed away as the desperate hallucinations of a ranger who'd been under too much stress from the missing persons cases. When they found my truck at the trailhead, they assumed I'd gotten lost and fell into one of the deep ravines. There's a memorial plaque before me now at the visitor center. Kenneth Stormcrow, dedicated ranger who gave his life trying to rescue others on the mountain he loved. If they only knew. The mountain is patient, but it's getting more active. The missing persons reports are spreading to other peaks in the Appalachians. Shenandoah, Great Smoky Mountains, the Blue Ridge. All part of the same creature, all waking up at the same time. And it's not just the East Coast. Got reports filtering in from Colorado, Montana, Alaska. Mountains all over the world where climbing accidents are increasing, where experienced mountaineers are vanishing without explanation. The network is awakening. Sometimes tourists ask the new rangers about me, about what really happened to Kenneth Stormcrow. The rangers tell them the official story. Tragic accident, body never recovered. He died doing what he loved. But late at night, when the wind howls through the peaks and the temperature drops without explanation, some visitors report seeing a figure near the summit, a ranger in an old uniform, warning them to stay on the marked trails, to be careful of the mountain. They think they're seeing my ghost. They're not wrong about the ghost part. If you ever visit Mount Mitchell, you might see me too. I'll look solid, normal, helpful. I might even save your life, guide you away from the most dangerous spots. But remember, I'm not really trying to help you anymore. I'm just making sure you have a good experience. Tell your friends how beautiful and safe the mountain is. Encourage more people to visit. The mountain is always hungry, and it's taught me that the best bait is someone people trust. End of report. Found in the personal files of Ranger Michael Torres, Mount Mitchell State Park, following his disappearance during a routine trail inspection, April 2024. The document was discovered on his computer, though Torres claimed she had no knowledge of writing it. No record exists of a Ranger Kenneth Stormcrow in Park Service files, though several visitors have reported encounters with a ranger matching this description. My name is Patricia Bloodworth, and I've been a ranger at George Washington National Forest for 11 years now. People always comment on my last name. Bloodworth sounds like something from a horror movie, they say. If only they knew how right they were. I specialize in water safety, which means I spend most of my time around the cave systems and underground rivers that snake through West Virginia like veins under the skin. The Lost River caves are my territory, and I know every tunnel, every pool, every place where the water gets deep and dark. My husband Tom used to joke that I was half fish. Patricia can hold her breath longer than anyone I know, he'd tell people at barbecues. She could probably live underwater if she had to. He was proud of my diving skills, proud that I could go places other rangers couldn't. That pride killed him. It was April 1979 when everything started to go wrong. The spring floods had been bad that year, worse than usual. The underground rivers were swollen and angry, rushing through the caves with a sound like distant thunder. I should have known something was different when the fish started acting strange, swimming in perfect formations, like they were marching instead of just swimming around. The first real sign of trouble came from a group of weekend fishermen. They'd been camping near the main entrance to Lost River Cave when they came running to my station, faces white as sheets. "Ma'am, you need to come see this," the oldest one said, his hands shaking as he poured coffee from my pot. "There's something down in that water that ain't natural." I get a lot of reports like this. People see shadows in the water, hear sounds echoing from the caves, and their minds fill in the blanks with monsters. Usually it's just rocks shifting or bats making noise, but these men were different. They were local guys, been fishing these waters for decades. They knew what belonged and what didn't. "What exactly did you see?" I asked, getting out my incident report forms. "Soldiers," the man said simply. "Men in old uniforms, working underwater like they could breathe it, building something, building walls and things that looked like cannons." The other two men nodded, their faces serious. One of them, a younger guy with calloused hands, spoke up. "They had tools, miss. Hammers and picks and things I ain't never seen before, working on the bottom like it was dry land. I wrote it all down, but in my head, I was already planning how to handle it. Probably some kids from the college playing pranks, maybe using scuba gear to mess with people. It wouldn't be the first time. I'll check it out, I promised them. In the meantime, I'd suggest finding another spot to fish. After they left, I sat in my station looking at the report. Something about their story bothered me, though I couldn't put my finger on what. Maybe it was how detailed it was, or how all three men told the same story without talking to each other first. Or maybe it was the way they kept looking over their shoulders, like they expected those underwater soldiers to come marching up the trail after them. That night, I called Tom to tell him about it. We'd been married 8 years, and he knew my job better than most spouses would. He'd started helping me with some of the water safety reports, doing research on the cave systems and their history. Civil War soldiers, he said when I told him about the fisherman's report. That's interesting. You know there were some skirmishes in that area during the war. Never heard of any battles in the caves themselves, but what? Well, there are some old stories, local legends about Confederate soldiers who got trapped in the caves during a flood. They say the men drowned, but their bodies were never found. I'd heard similar stories before. Every cave system in the area had legends about people who went in and never came out. Most of them were probably true. Caves are dangerous, especially when the water's high. Just stories, I said, but something in my stomach felt cold. Probably, Tom agreed. But Patricia, be careful when you go down there. Use the buddy system. Take extra gear. Something about this feels off. He was right about that. Something definitely felt off. But I was a trained professional with over a decade of experience. I could handle whatever those fishermen had seen, whether it was college kids or just shadows and imagination. I planned to check out the caves first thing in the morning. If I'd known what was really waiting for me down there, I would have packed up and moved to Arizona instead. The next morning, the forest felt wrong. It's hard to explain to someone who doesn't spend time in the wilderness. But forests have a rhythm. Birds sing in patterns. Animals move in predictable ways. Even the wind has its own schedule. That morning, everything was quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before something terrible happens. I packed my diving gear and headed to the cave entrance. The water level was still high from the spring floods, which meant some of the smaller passages would be completely underwater. Perfect conditions for whatever the fishermen had seen to hide from sight. The main pool at the cave entrance looked normal enough. Clear water, rocky bottom, nothing unusual. I suited up and checked my equipment twice. Tom's words from the night before kept echoing in my head. Be careful, use the buddy system. I should have listened to him, but rangers work alone most of the time, and I'd made solo dives in these caves hundreds of times before. The water was colder than it should have been for April. Even with my wetsuit, I could feel the chills seeping into my bones as I descended. My flashlight cut through the darkness, showing the familiar rock walls and sandy bottom. At first, everything looked normal. Fish swam around me in their usual random patterns. My breathing echoed in the underwater chambers, regular and calm. 20 feet down, 30 feet, 40 feet. Nothing unusual. Then I saw the boot. It was sitting upright on a ledge, like someone had carefully placed it there. Old-fashioned leather, the kind you might see in a Civil War museum. Perfectly preserved, despite being underwater for who knows how long. I swam closer to investigate. The boot was definitely old, but it looked new. No decay, no rot, just sitting there like its owner had taken it off yesterday. That's when I noticed the tools. Hammers, picks, shovels, dozens of them, arranged in neat rows along the cave floor. All of them looked old-fashioned, hand-forged iron with wooden handles. Some were tools I recognized. Others looked like nothing I'd ever seen before. My heart started beating faster. This wasn't college kids playing pranks. This was something else entirely. I followed the line of tools deeper into the cave, my flashlight beam dancing ahead of me. The passage opened up into a larger chamber, one I'd explored many times before. Except now it was different. The walls had been carved, not by water or natural erosion, by human hands. The rock had been cut into precise shapes, forming what looked like fortifications, gun ports, defensive positions. And everywhere, scattered across the chamber floor, were more boots, dozens of them, all perfectly preserved, all arranged in formation like an invisible army was standing at attention. I need to surface, I thought, need to get back up and call for backup. But as I turned to leave, my flashlight caught something that made my blood freeze in my veins. A face, a human face, pale as moonlight, watching me from the shadows. The man was wearing a gray uniform, Confederate gray, with brass buttons that gleamed in my flashlight beams. His eyes were open, alert, intelligent, and he was breathing underwater like it was air. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. He didn't move, didn't gesture, just watched me with those pale, ancient eyes. Then, slowly, he smiled, and nodded toward the deeper parts of the cave like he was inviting me in. I kicked hard for the surface, my lungs burning and my heart pounding so loud I could hear it over the sound of my breathing gear. Behind me I could feel those eyes watching, but I didn't dare look back. I broke the surface, gasping, yanking off my mask and struggling to get to the rocky shore. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the buckles on my gear. A rational person would have called for backup right then, would have reported what I'd seen and let someone else deal with it. But I kept thinking about those tools, those perfectly preserved boots, that impossible face breathing underwater. There had to be an explanation. Had to be something I was missing. I drove back to my station and called Tom at work. "Honey, you sound upset," he said as soon as he heard my voice. "What happened down there?" I told him everything. The tools, the carved walls, the man in the gray uniform. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. Most people would have started asking if I'd been breathing bad air or if my equipment had malfunctioned. "Patricia," he said when I was finished, "I think you need to stay away from those caves for a while." "I can't just stay away, it's my job." "Then get back up, don't go down there alone again." He was right, of course, but something about what I'd seen had hooked into my brain and wouldn't let go. The way that soldier had looked at me, not surprised, not afraid, like he'd been expecting me. "I'll be careful," I promised, "but I need to figure out what's really going on down there." That night, I did research. I pulled out every book I had about local Civil War history, every map of the cave systems, every old newspaper article about strange disappearances or unusual sightings. What I found didn't make me feel any better. There had been more than just skirmishes in the area during the war. There had been a whole unit of Confederate soldiers who disappeared without a trace in 1863. 37 men last seen heading toward the Lost River Caves during a Union pursuit. According to the historical records, search parties had looked for them for weeks but never found any trace. No bodies, no equipment, no sign they'd ever been there at all. The official report said they'd probably drowned in the flooded caves and their bodies had been washed away by the underground currents. But local stories told a different version. They said the soldiers had gone into the caves to hide and never came out. That on quiet nights you could sometimes hear voices echoing from deep underground. Voices singing old war songs, calling orders, planning battles that ended more than 100 years ago. I closed the books and tried to tell myself it was all just folklore, but I couldn't stop thinking about that face in the water, those pale eyes watching me with ancient intelligence. Whatever was down there, it was still waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that soldier's face staring back at me from the dark water. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going back down there, but this time I was bringing backup. I called my supervisor and told him about the archaeological discovery I'd made in the caves. I didn't mention the breathing underwater part or the face that watched me, just the tools and the carved walls. "Sounds like it could be significant," he said. "I'll send Rodriguez and Chen to help you document everything. They should be there by noon." Rodriguez and Chen were good rangers, both experienced divers. If there was a rational explanation for what I'd seen, they'd help me find it. While I waited for them, I decided to check the cave entrance from above ground. Sometimes you can see things from the surface that you miss underwater. The forest was still too quiet. No bird songs, no squirrels chattering, no normal forest sounds at all. Just an unnatural hush that made every step seem too loud. At the cave entrance, I noticed something I'd missed the day before. The rocks around the pool had been moved. Not by natural erosion or random rockfall. They'd been arranged in a pattern, a defensive pattern like the beginning of a wall, and the water level had dropped overnight. It should have been the same as yesterday, maybe even higher after the recent rains. Instead, it was at least 2 feet lower. Rodriguez and Chen arrived right on schedule, their gear loaded in the back of their truck. "So what exactly did you find down there?" Chen asked as they suited up. He was younger than me, maybe 26, with an engineering background that made him good at analyzing structural changes. "Old tools, carved walls, possibly some Civil War artifacts," I said, sticking to the facts I could prove. "The weird part is how well preserved everything is." Rodriguez nodded. He was older, more experienced, the kind of ranger who'd seen everything twice. Underground caves can preserve things pretty well. Cold water, no oxygen, stable temperatures. We descended together, our 3 flashlight beams cutting through the dark water. I led them to the chamber where I'd seen the tools and the carved walls, except the tools were gone. The chamber looked exactly like it had before any of this started. Natural rock walls, sandy bottom, no sign that anyone had ever been there. "You sure this is the right place?" Rodriguez asked, his voice muffled by his breathing gear. I swam around the chamber, checking every wall, every ledge, every spot where I'd seen those perfectly arranged tools. Nothing. It was like I'd imagined the whole thing. "This is it," I said. But doubt was creeping into my voice. The tools were right here, all lined up in rows. Chen was examining the walls with his engineer's eye running his hands over the rock surfaces. "These walls look natural to me, Patricia. Water erosion, normal cave formation." But I knew what I'd seen. The tools, the carved fortifications, the impossible face breathing underwater. It had all been real. We spent an hour searching the chamber and the connecting passages. No tools, no carvings, no evidence of any human presence at all. My backup was starting to exchange the kind of looks that meant they thought I was losing my mind. "Maybe the current moved everything," I suggested weakly. "Strong water flow could have swept the tools into deeper chambers." "Possibly," Rodriguez said diplomatically. "Why don't we check some of the other areas?" We moved deeper into the cave system, following passages I'd explored dozens of times before. Everything looked normal, natural, exactly the way it should look. Then, Chen's light went out. Not dimmed, not flickered. Just died completely, like someone had flipped a switch. He tapped it a few times, checked the connections, but nothing happened. "Equipment failure," he said through his regulator. "I've got backup." But his backup light wouldn't turn on either. Neither would his emergency beacon or any of the other electronic equipment he was carrying. "That's weird," Rodriguez said. "Let me try mine." His lights died too. One by one, every piece of electronic equipment we had just stopped working, except for mine. My lights stayed bright, my gear kept functioning normally. "We need to surface," Rodriguez said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. This much equipment failure isn't normal. But as we turned to head back, we found that the passage had changed. Where there had been one tunnel leading back to the main chamber, now there were 3, all identical, all dark, all leading in different directions. "That's not possible," Chen said, his voice tighter, but with the kind of fear that comes when your training can't explain what's happening. "Caves don't just change." I shone my light down each passage, looking for some clue about which one led, back to the surface. They all looked the same. Smooth walls, sandy floors, no distinctive features. That's when we heard the singing. It was faint at first, barely audible over the sound of our breathing gear. Old voices, rough voices, singing something that sounded like a marching song. The melody echoed through the water, seeming to come from all 3 passages at once. "What the hell is that?" Rodriguez whispered. The singing got louder, clearer. I could make out words now, though I didn't recognize the song. Something about glory and death and fighting for the cause. The kind of song soldiers might sing around a campfire during a long war. Then we saw the lights. Not electric lights like ours, but the yellow glow of oil lanterns, moving through the water like fireflies. Dozens of them, coming toward us through all 3 passages. And carrying the lanterns were the soldiers. They marched in formation underwater, their gray uniforms flowing around them like they were walking through air instead of water. Their faces were pale, ancient, but their eyes burned with purpose. Rodriguez grabbed my arm and pointed frantically toward what looked like another passage. We swam hard in that direction, but the tunnel seemed to stretch longer and longer, like we were swimming in place. Behind us, the singing got louder. The lantern lights got brighter. Chen was panicking now, his breathing irregular and fast. Panic underwater is deadly. It makes people do stupid things, use up their air too quickly, make mistakes that can kill them. "Stay calm," I called to him, but my own heart was hammering against my ribs. The passage finally opened up into another chamber, one I didn't recognize. The walls here really had been carved, not by water but by human hands. The rock had been shaped into bunks, shelves, storage areas. Like living quarters that had been carved out of the stone itself, and they were occupied. Soldiers sat on the stone bunks, cleaning weapons that gleamed like new. Others stood in small groups discussing tactics in voices that carried clearly through the water. They all wore the same gray uniforms, all had that same pale, ancient look. One of them, an officer by his stripes, looked up and saw us. He smiled and raised his hand in what might have been a greeting or a command. The singing stopped. Every soldier in the chamber turned to look at us with those burning pale eyes. "Swim," I said. "Swim now." We bolted for what looked like another exit, but it was like trying to run through honey. The water seemed thick, resistant, like it was trying to hold us back. I could hear voices behind us now, not singing, but calling out orders. "Bring them back. We have need of them. The living must serve." My lungs were burning, my air supply running low. Beside me, Chen was struggling, his movements getting weaker and more panicked. Then, somehow, we were back in the main pool at the cave entrance. The 3 of us broke the surface together, gasping and choking and pulling each other toward the rocky shore. None of us spoke until we were back on dry land, our gear stripped off and scattered around us. "What the fuck was that?" Chen finally said, his voice shaking. Rodriguez was checking his equipment, trying to figure out why everything had failed at once. Some kind of electromagnetic interference, maybe? Could explain the lights going out. But I knew it wasn't electromagnetic interference. I knew exactly what we'd seen down there, even if I couldn't explain how it was possible. The Confederate soldiers who'd disappeared in 1863 hadn't drowned. They'd found something else down there in the dark water, something that let them keep fighting their war long after the rest of the world had moved on. And now they wanted us to join them. That night, Tom didn't come home from work. I waited until 8, then 9, then called his office. His supervisor said he'd left at the usual time, maybe even a little early. Said he'd seemed excited about something, mentioned he had research to show me. By 10 o'clock, I was calling hospitals. By 11, I was calling the police. They found his car at 3 in the morning, parked at the Lost River Cave entrance. His wallet and keys were still inside, but there was no sign of Tom anywhere. The officer who called me was professional, but not very hopeful. "People go missing in cave systems all the time, ma'am. Usually they turn up in a day or two, just lost or injured. But sometimes they never turn up at all." I knew where Tom had gone. The same place those Confederate soldiers had gone in 1863. The same place that had been calling to me ever since I'd first seen that face in the water. I should have told the police about what Rodriguez, Chen, and I had seen. Should have warned them that the caves weren't safe, that there was something down there that didn't follow the normal rules. But who would believe me? Even Rodriguez and Chen had convinced themselves there was a rational explanation for what we'd experienced. "Equipment malfunction," they kept saying. "Disorientation, nitrogen narcosis, some kind of hallucination." I knew better. I knew Tom was down there with those pale-eyed soldiers, and I was the only one who could get him back. I went to the cave alone, just after dawn. The forest was still unnaturally quiet, but now it felt expectant, like it was waiting for something to happen. The water level had dropped again overnight. Now I could see things that had been hidden before, carved symbols on the rocks around the pool, channels cut into the stone to direct water flow, what looked like the remains of wooden platforms just under the surface. This wasn't just a cave system. It was a fort, an underwater fort that had been under construction for more than 100 years. I suited up and descended, following the now familiar path to the mall in chamber. But this time, I wasn't surprised when I found it transformed. The tools were back, but now they were being used. Dozens of soldiers worked throughout the chamber, some carving new passages, others shaping stone blocks with impossible precision. They moved through the water like they'd been born to it, talking and laughing and working with the easy familiarity of men who'd been doing the same job for decades. One of them, a young soldier who couldn't have been more than 19 when he died, looked up from his work and waved at me like we were old friends. "She's here," he called to the others. "The ranger's back." They gathered around me, a crowd of gray uniforms and pale faces, all talking at once. "Been waiting for you, miss. Got work that needs doing. The lieutenant wants to see you." They led me deeper into the caves through passages that definitely hadn't existed the day before. The walls here were covered with maps, detailed, hand-drawn charts of every cave system, every underground river, every hidden passage for hundreds of miles around. And sitting at a stone table studying the maps with intense concentration was Tom. He looked up when he saw me, and his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Patricia, you made it. I was hoping you'd come." "Tom, what are you doing here? Everyone's looking for you. The police, search and rescue." He stood up and took my hands in his, and I could feel that his skin was cold as the cave water. "I'm helping with the research, honey. These men have been working on something incredible, something that could change everything." "Tom, these men are dead. They've been dead for over 100 years. He laughed like I'd made a joke. "Dead? Look around you. Do they look dead to you?" And he was right. They didn't look dead. They looked more alive than anyone I'd ever seen, their eyes bright with purpose, their mover immense, quick, and sure. "We've been building," Tom continued, gesturing toward the maps. "Building an army, building fortifications, preparing for the next phase of the war." "What war?" "The Civil War ended in 1865. The soldiers around us laughed at that, the sound echoing through the chambers like music. "The war never ended," said a voice from behind me. I turned to see the officer I'd glimpsed before, the one with lieutenant's stripes on his gray sleeve. It just moved to different ground. He was older than the others, with steel gray hair and the kind of scars that come from real battles. When he spoke, all the other soldiers stood at attention. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Colonel James Whitmore, late of the 33rd Virginia Infantry, and you're going to help us win this war once and for all." "I don't understand." Tom squeezed my hands. "They've been recruiting, Patricia. For over a century, they've been bringing people down here, people with skills they need. Engineers, doctors, soldiers, anyone who can help with the cause." "What cause?" Colonel Whitmore smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "The cause of the dead, ma'am. The cause of everyone who's ever died in America's wars. We've been building an army down here, preparing for the day when we rise up and take back what's rightfully ours." "From who?" "From the living." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop 10 degrees. Around me, the soldiers were still smiling, still friendly. But now I could see something else in their pale eyes. Something hungry. "You see, ma'am," the colonel continued, "the living have had their time. They've made a mess of things up there on the surface. Wars without end, hatred without purpose, death without honor. It's time for those who understand the true cost of war to take charge." I looked at Tom, hoping to see some sign that he understood how insane this all was. But his eyes had the same pale, hungry look as the others. "Think about it, Patricia," he said. "No more senseless violence. No more children dying in wars they didn't start. We could bring order to, the world, Real order. By killing everyone? By recruiting everyone, Colonel Whitmore corrected. The living will join us, one way or another. And with your expertise in these cave systems, we can expand our operations to every waterway in the country. That's when I understood. They didn't just want Tom for his research skills. They wanted me to help them spread their underwater army through every cave, every river, every lake in America. And if I refuse? The colonel's smile widened. Ma'am, refusal isn't really an option anymore. You see, the moment you breathed the air down here, you started becoming one of us. The process takes time, but it's irreversible. I could feel it now, a coldness spreading through my chest, my breathing becoming easier underwater, my vision getting sharper in the darkness. Whatever they were, I was becoming it too. How long do I have? Until the next flood, Tom said softly. When the spring waters rise again, the transformation will be complete. Then you'll understand why this war needs to be fought. I looked around the chamber at all those pale, patient faces. They weren't evil, I realized. They honestly believed they were doing the right thing, saving the world from the chaos the living had made of it. But I also knew that if they succeeded, if they really did build an army large enough to challenge the surface world, it would mean the end of everything I'd ever cared about. The flood was coming in 3 days. I played along for 2 days, pretending to help with their plans while I looked for a way out. Tom showed me their maps, their recruitment lists, their carefully laid plans for expanding into other cave systems. It was impressive in a terrifying way. They'd been at this for over a century, and they were very good at it. The colonel assigned me quarters in the living section, a stone room carved from the cave wall wit, furniture made from driftwood and artifacts salvaged from the surface world. My job was to help them identify other cave systems suitable for expansion, other rangers and divers who might be recruited to help with the cause. But I was also learning their weaknesses. They were bound to the water. Outside the caves, in the dry world above, they became weaker, more vulnerable. The magic or curse or whatever force animated them was connected to the underground rivers. More importantly, they needed the living to do certain kinds of work. The dead soldiers were strong and tireless, but they couldn't operate modern equipment, couldn't understand new technology, couldn't adapt to changes in the surface world. That's why they needed recruits like Tom and me. On the 3rd day, the flood came. I felt it happening inside me as the water levels rose, the final transformation from living person to whatever these soldiers had become. My skin grew pale and cold. My need for air decreased. My vision adapted to see clearly in absolute darkness. But I also felt something else, a connection to every drop of water in the cave system, an awareness of the currents and flows that connected these underground rivers to waterways all across the country. The colonel had been right. With this new awareness, I could help them spread their army anywhere there was water. Every cave system, every river, every lake could become a recruitment center for their war against the living. That's when I made my choice. Instead of helping them expand, I used my new connection to the water to do something else. I opened every passage, every tunnel, every channel that connected the lost river system to the outside world. The Confederate fort, built so carefully over more than a century, began to drain. "What are you doing?" Tom screamed as the water levels dropped and the soldiers began to weaken. "Ending this," I said, though my voice sounded different now, echoing strangely in the draining chambers. Colonel Whitmore tried to stop me, but he was already fading as the water that sustained him flowed out through the open passages. "You don't understand," he gasped. "The living world is destroying itself. We were trying to save it." "By destroying it first," I replied. "I've seen what you call salvation." The soldiers fought to block the passages I'd opened, but there were too many of them, and they were growing weaker by the minute. One by one, they began to fade like morning mist, their forms becoming translucent and then disappearing entirely. Tom was the last to go. He reached for me as the water around him dropped below the level needed to sustain whatever he'd become. "Patricia, please," he whispered. "We could have been together forever." "I know," I said, taking his hand as he faded away. I'm sorry." When it was over, I was alone in the drained caves, surrounded by empty uniforms and rusted weapons and the silence of deep stone. But I was still connected to the water, still aware of every stream and river and underground flow for hundreds of miles around. The transformation couldn't be reversed, but I could choose how to use it. I became a guardian instead of a conqueror, a protector of the waterways instead of their destroyer. I'm still here, 43 years later. Still a ranger, officially, though I work different hours now and my supervisors don't ask too many questions about my methods. Sometimes I find other remnants of the colonel's army, small groups of dead soldiers in forgotten caves, usually trying to rebuild what I destroyed. I disperse them gently when I can, more forcefully when necessary. And sometimes I encounter new threats, things that want to use America's waterways for purposes even worse than the Confederates' war against the living. The living world has its problems, yes, war and hatred and senseless violence, just like the colonel said, but it also has hope and love, and the possibility of getting better. The dead only have. For the wars, they died fighting over and over again, forever. My name is Patricia Bloodworth, and I guard the spaces between the living and the dead. It's not the job I planned to have, but it's the job the world needs me to do. The caves remember everything, and so do I.